I had assumed that this new chapter in my life would begin under more favorable conditions, but now it does. My husband, Kevin, has demolished our family home, leaving me standing in front of an empty place where both of my parents once stood. Here, amidst the ruins of my early years, Kevin startlingly disclosed his actual motivations. "What topic are you discussing? Are you crazy? Bring your inheritance to our house now," he yelled. His direct remarks rendered me mute. Still, as the ridiculousness of the scenario struck me, I couldn't hold back my laughter. "Oh, I see. That's what this whole thing was about," I murmured, shaking my head cynically. My spouse Kevin and his parents stared at me in disbelief, not understanding why I would respond the way I did. I took a moment to reintroduce myself, hoping that would clear things up. Brenda is my name. I'm the modest daughter of a dedicated salaried worker from a lowly beginning. When I was 28, I was married to Kevin, and together we raised 3 amazing kids. Now that I'm 50, I had anticipated a calm existence with my spouse, but circumstances had other ideas. I talked about how difficult it was to care for my sick parents, especially my mother's lengthy battle with cancer. Kevin's support was lacking in spite of the toll it took on me, both emotionally and physically. He frequently bemoaned the hardships of sharing my mother's illness, criticizing everything from the cleaning to the food. In the end, we returned to my parents' house so that my mother could receive better care. Kevin continued to be indifferent to her worsening illness throughout this time, which resulted in her being admitted to the hospital and ultimately passing away. It was distressing to see Kevin act so detached during the funeral arrangements. Even during the funeral, when I really needed his support, he remained distant, choosing to sit in the rear with other distant relatives rather than in the family area with me. I had said to him in a whisper, "I wish you would sit with the family," throughout the service. His response was icy and disengaged. "No, I'm not uncomfortable here. After all, I'm not a blood related," he declared. Hearing us talk, his mother interrupted, saying, "He's your spouse, not your mother's son." Here, Kevin is an outsider. Kevin was detached from his family, and his parents echoed him when they said he shouldn't sit in the family area, even while stories and whispers went around among distant relatives about our tense relationship. They argued that, in spite of the evident stress it created, this commitment to custom was justified. Kevin's parents and my brother's family joined us at my house following the funeral. I remained calm and brought them coffee in spite of their previous insensitivity. But what really got me was their comment about how expensive condolence money is, which made it clear how they really felt about the whole thing. The truth of my new life without my parents, and with a partner who seemed more like a stranger than a spouse, dawned forcibly on me as I stood in the rubble of my boyhood home. I forced a grin and exited the room, watching with heavy heart as I overheard bits and pieces of conversation between Kevin and his parents. They were talking, with a hint of derision, about how hard it was to live with me. It wasn't the first time they had behaved disrespectfully. In fact, it had been a recurring topic in our marriage, made especially difficult by the recent death of my mother and the funeral of my father. When I thought back on these times, I saw how little they had bothered and how much I had put up with. It was terrible to see Kevin's disengagement and even his guilt about the living arrangements I had forced upon him. I heard them laughing behind me, berating me for not allowing them to take my mother's possessions. Kevin and his parents stormed out, labeling me an outsider, when I asked that her mementos be divided among our family members, causing a heated confrontation. Following the event, Kevin took a temporary leave of absence. He surprised me by saying he was worried and by giving me and the kids travel vouchers for a vacation. I was surprised by his abrupt change in attitude, but I was also glad. I asked in jest, I wonder if your father felt guilty, as I took the coupons. Kevin, feeling more laid back than normal, told me to take my time. Yeah, stay at the kids' places if you like, he said, indicating that he intended to relax at his parents' house while I was away. Following his advice, I visited my son Stephen and daughter Susan before the trip. Seeing them during the time I was taking care of my mother had been challenging. To lessen their everyday difficulties, I spent some time preparing and freezing meals for them. Mom, you never get to relax, but thank you. This helps, they both said, appreciative of the home-cooked meals. Thanks to Kevin's unexpected gesture, the trip finally came, and I spent a relaxing time at the hotel with my children. The break seemed to wash away some of the fatigue and sorrow from the months of caregiving and the loss of my parents. After nearly a week, we returned home with renewed spirits and bright smiles. That was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while, Susan suggested, a sentiment that caught me off guard. Really, once in a while? I replied, still unsure about this sudden shift in Kevin's behavior, but willing to acknowledge his effort. This time, I couldn't help but chuckle, albeit with a tinge of suspicion. But I wonder if he's up to something, I said half-jokingly. Susan quickly dismissed my doubts. Don't say that. Your father must have had his reasons, she replied confidently. I smiled, planning to return home, share the wonderful memories with Kevin, and perhaps start afresh in our married life. However, the scene that greeted me upon my return left me speechless. What's going on? The house is. My voice trailed off as I took in the sight of where our family home once stood, now shockingly absent. Then Kevin appeared, his parents smirking behind him, their expressions unnervingly gleeful. Kevin, what's the meaning of this? I demanded, my confusion turning to anger. Kevin, mirroring his parents' unsettling smiles, responded, finally, the baggage is gone. From today, we'll be living with my parents at my house. His words hit me like a cold splash of water. Why are you talking about this? I countered, struggling to maintain my composure against Kevin's arrogant declaration. He coldly continued, lost your mind? Your family home has been demolished. Come to our house with the inheritance already. Everything you inherited belongs to me. The truth was stark and painful. The disappearance of my house was Kevin's doing, all for inheritance. Despite the overwhelming mix of frustration and sadness, I refused to let Kevin manipulate the situation. No way, I thought to myself and burst into laughter at their smug faces. What? Why are you laughing? What a strange woman. Has she gone mad? My mother-in-law muttered, looking at me as if I were a ghost. Facing them squarely, I declared, don't you guys know? I didn't inherit a single penny, so there's no inheritance. My laughter resumed, mocking their greedy assumptions. Kevin, confused and angry, demanded, what do you mean? Explain yourself. But I chose silence. There was no need to enlighten them further. I'm not going to live with strangers. If you want to live together, do it alone, I said firmly, rejecting his proposal outright. My mother-in-law's anger flared. You helped with your parents' household, but you won't do ours, she accused. You know why I did that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? But you chose to do so because you didn't want to do housework, I retorted, leaving Kevin and his mother biting their lips in frustration. And demolishing my family home on your own. There are things you can and can't do. I yelled at them, the betrayal cutting deep. Without another word, I left the scene, Kevin's voice trailing after me. Where are you going? But I didn't look back. I needed to secure a place to sleep for the night and couldn't bear to see Kevin's face any longer. Immediately, I consulted a lawyer. It couldn't be that easy to demolish a house, especially ones still in my mother's name. Upon investigation, an unbelievable truth came to light. Kevin and my father-in-law had orchestrated the demolition themselves, utilizing acquaintances from my father-in-law's demolition company and renting heavy machinery. They had even given me the travel vouchers to conveniently get me out of the way. The realization of such deceit brought tears to my eyes and filled me with a profound sense of betrayal. Is there any way to punish the three of them? I asked the lawyer through tears, desperate for justice. The lawyer gave me a reassuring smile as he laid out the legal options. Your husband, who demolished the house registered under your mother's name without permission, can be charged with criminal damage and sued for compensation, he explained. Encouraged, I nodded, and he promptly began the legal proceedings. A few days later, an irate call from Kevin interrupted my thoughts. "What's this letter of demand about?" he demanded. "Oh, you received it. Since you destroyed our important house, you'll have to compensate," I replied calmly, despite my rising anger. "Compensate? I told you we were moving into the family home. I demolished an unused house for you. You should be grateful, not demanding compensation. Just bring your inheritance and come back home," Kevin insisted arrogantly. Grateful for having our home demolished. Really? I scoffed over the phone. And about the inheritance. And coming home. There's none to bring since I didn't inherit anything. I shouted back, my frustration evident. Kevin fell silent, caught off guard by my outburst. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was because of this. I had a whole year to spend with my mother. It was obvious we would have discussed the inheritance. I told her I don't need anything. Give it all to my brother. Thus, all cash and securities were inherited by my brother. He said that I should get the house since he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could be rented out to someone else. That was the plan for me to inherit the house. Now, either you and your father restore the family home to its original state or pay the amount written in that letter. I'm being kind enough to suggest a settlement. If you can't pay, I'll file a police report and sue you. I spoke firmly. Sorry, I didn't think you'd be so angry, Kevin replied, his tone changing. He began making excuses, suggesting that as long as the family home was there, he couldn't live with his parents, especially since his father had always wanted to live with us. My father-in-law was particularly fond of my son Stephen and had previously expressed a desire to live with him. They had refused to live together back then because it would have made commuting difficult, but his parents seemed to think. I was the one opposed to it. It turns out that Kevin had convinced his parents to agree to this plan by demolishing my family home and making them believe I would move in with the inheritance. This revelation only added to my resolve to see this legal battle through, ensuring that justice was served for the unwarranted destruction of my family home. Even with Kevin's new revelation, forgiveness was far beyond my grasp. Please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. Dad is remorseful too, Kevin pleaded over the phone. If he's truly remorseful, then he'll agree to the settlement. I responded firmly before hanging up. Despite his continual apologies through calls and messages, insisting he was sorry, I remained steadfast. If you're sorry, then hurry up and transfer the money. I pushed back, knowing well that our beloved family home was beyond restoration, but seeking some form of reparation for the deep hurt caused. In the meantime, I stayed at my brother's place with Susan. My brother, aware of the situation and likely furious about the demolition done without his consent, supported my stance. I won't interfere, but I'll lend a hand. Do what you think is right, Barbara, he encouraged. Everyone around me condemned Kevin's reckless actions and supported me through this ordeal. A month passed with no compensation, and during that time, Kevin ceased all contact. I couldn't impose on Susan's hospitality indefinitely and was eager to secure the promised funds to stabilize my living situation. However, a startling discovery interrupted these plans. One day, Susan, looking at her smartphone, remarked, "This apron looks a lot like Grandma's." She showed me the screen. It was a product page on a flea market app. The item resembled a unique apron I had made for my mother. "What's this?" I asked, shocked. "This is Grandma's apron. I made it, so there's no mistake," I said. Susan scrolled through other listings, and we found nearly 50 items that unmistakably belonged to my mother. It was clear to me that Kevin was behind this. Furious, I called him immediately. "What's this about the app, Kevin?" I demanded. He sounded annoyed and feigned ignorance. "Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's belongings, aren't you? Cancel the listings right now," I confronted him. Kevin, sounding panicked, denied everything. "What? No, it's not me," he stammered. Undeterred, I retorted, "Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over to get everything back." Susan and I drove to Kevin's parents' house. Upon arrival, I called out for Kevin, who met us at the entrance, visibly flustered. "I don't know anything about it," he insisted. Susan, supporting me, pressed him for answers. While this was happening, Kevin's parents, likely aware of our presence, came outside. His mother, seeing Susan, greeted her with a smile, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Susan, you're here," she said cheerfully. Susan, clearly upset, urged her grandmother to tell Dad to tell the truth. "The truth. It seems like Dad is selling the stuff Grandma passed away with," Susan disclosed. Hearing this, my mother-in-law laughed, dismissing the accusation. Kevin looked increasingly troubled, repeating, "It's not me." Then his mother interjected loudly, "Kevin's selling them. That can't be true." The situation escalated quickly as we confronted the tangled web of deceit, hoping to reclaim what was rightfully ours and uncover the truth behind the distressing sales. The revelation from my mother-in-law left me stunned and drained of color. "But I'm the one selling them," she cheerfully admitted, oblivious to the gravity of her actions. Kevin glanced at his mother with a worried look, clearly aware of the brewing storm. Susan, beside me, was equally shocked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What did you say?" I managed to utter, struggling to keep my voice steady. My mother-in-law, undeterred, continued to explain her new hobby with a light-hearted air. "It's quite a task, you know. Packaging has to be done carefully, and the photos need to be taken well," she said, treating the whole ordeal as if it were a fun pastime. She seemed completely unaware that she was handling and selling stolen goods. My frustration boiled over. "Cancel the listing." "That's not something Grandma can just sell," Susan implored, her voice breaking as she tried to reason with her grandmother. But my mother-in-law dismissed her pleas casually. "What's the big deal? I found a fun hobby. I use what I can, and the rest makes a nice little income. It's good for preventing dementia. After all, I'm the only grandma left, and Susan, you want me to stay healthy and live long, right?" she retorted, her tone flippant and dismissive. It was clear she wouldn't listen to our pleas. Realizing that talking would get us nowhere, I took decisive action. "Let's go home, Susan, but first we need to address this properly," I said, pulling a reluctant Susan with me as we left the house and headed straight to the police station. I had not initially planned to involve the police in the house demolition, but theft and unauthorized sale were a different matter entirely. The officers were prompt in their response, and the flea market app company cooperated by suspending my mother-in-law's account, ensuring no more items would be sold. After leaving the police station, I called Kevin. "I had your mother's account suspended. You knew about this, didn't you? You're complicit." Also, I filed a police report. Please cooperate with the investigation, I asserted firmly. Kevin, frantic, tried to plead family ties. We're family, aren't we? Please withdraw it. Stranger, right? I still haven't received any compensation or damages for the house being demolished, and I see no remorse from you. I countered, my anger evident. Despite my frustrations, I wasn't devoid of compassion. Having shared many years with Kevin, I sighed, acknowledging the long and possibly rocky path ahead in resolving these issues. I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Everything must be returned. And Kevin, your father looked very ill. Has he been to the hospital? I inquired, a part of me still concerned for his well-being despite everything. I had seen my father-in-law earlier, and he looked significantly thinner and unwell compared to just a few months ago. It seemed unlikely that the family had even noticed his declining health amidst their other preoccupations. The next day, my father-in-law called not to express gratitude, but to scold me. You're treating me like a sick person, planning to dump me in a hospital to get rid of me. I have to protect Kevin and your mother. I'm not going to any hospital, he protested. His response to my genuine concern stung. I apologize if it was out of line. I was just concerned. I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Don't patronize me, he snapped back, his words harsh and dismissive. His reaction only added to the complexity of our already strained relationship, leaving me to navigate these turbulent family dynamics with care and resolve. A few days after our conversation, my father-in-law's health declined significantly, leading him to seek medical attention. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Kevin, in a state of panic, called me. Dad has terminal cancer. What should I do? He asked, his voice laden with anxiety. I responded coolly, remembering past grievances. That's none of my concern. Remember what you said when I suggested the hospital. You said you're not weak and short-lived like my parents. Deal with it yourself. How can you be so heartless? Kevin retorted. Who's the heartless one? Did you ever say a kind word when my mother was sick? Reflect on your actions. I snapped back and ended the call. Sadly, my father-in-law passed away shortly after. As a human being, I didn't want to harbor resentment towards someone who had passed away. But recalling all that had transpired, I found myself unable to mourn him genuinely. After the funeral, a will was discovered. It detailed that the house would be inherited by my grandson Stephen, and the remainder of the estate was to be divided between Kevin's mother and Kevin. I was surprised to see Stephen named in the will. My father-in-law had always favored him, perhaps hoping Stephen would continue to live in the house despite the inheritance potentially being more of a burden due to taxes and maintenance. Stephen was pleased to inherit the house, although I had concerns. It wasn't my place to interfere. Stephen's inheritance proceeded, and my mother-in-law, delighted, paid the inheritance taxes, claiming it was all worth it for her grandson. Despite my mixed feelings about the situation, I didn't say anything further. Then something unexpected happened. Responding to a message from Kevin, I visited his parents' house. Arriving there, I was met with a shocking sight. Heavy machinery and demolition workers were tearing down the house. It's my house. I can do whatever I want with it, right? Stephen declared, seemingly unbothered by the destruction. Stephen, what are you doing? Stop it right now. I cried out, my heart sinking. Even if I stop now, we can't live there anyway, Mom, Stephen responded calmly. My mother-in-law and Kevin, witnessing the destruction of what was once a significant asset, pleaded with Stephen to stop, but he was resolute. Have you forgotten what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom? Grandma, you were horrible to her too, right? Did you apologize? Stephen's tone was sharp, his earlier calmness replaced by a stern demeanor. His words cut deep, and both Kevin and his mother were visibly shaken, kneeling as the machines loudly continued their work. Witnessing the scene, I felt a complex mix of emotions, but ultimately a sense of relief. It seemed that Stephen, in his way, was settling scores and correcting past wrongs against our family. Later, Kevin, having finally received his inheritance, paid the compensation and damages owed to me. Stephen had also managed to recover the stolen items my mother-in-law took from my mother, ensuring their safe return. "Mom, you've got me and Susan," Stephen reassured. Overwhelmed by the support of my children, I finally allowed myself to shed tears of relief. Kevin and his mother, having lost their house and now, with limited resources, moved back into company housing, and their fortunes dramatically reversed. Our greatest asset persisted throughout, and that was the link between Stephen and Susan, which provided love and support to each other, even in the face of hardship. Kevin's mother and him were now the talk of the town. I was contacted by the wife of one of Kevin's coworkers, with whom I am close, following their move back into company housing. Sincerely, I told her the whole backstory. They would have to be thrifty about where they lived in the future, what with Kevin's impending retirement. Although living in corporate housing may not be comfortable for them, they created the circumstance. I occasionally considered asking friends, more out of curiosity and wanting to have a story to tell than anything else, for updates on Kevin and his mother. I kept living with Susan in the interim, but things were about to change. Thanks to the sale of the property where his parents' house formerly stood, Stephen was in a much better financial position and had plans to get married and start a new family. The money from the land had proved to be unexpectedly large, making the house that was torn down shockingly advantageous. Stephen had extended a cordial invitation to move in with him. "Mom, come live with us," and his soon-to-be wife had enthusiastically joined him. Though I knew I couldn't live with Susan forever, I accepted their offer with gratitude. I was resolved to be a mother-in-law who supported and cared for her family without going overboard. I was excited to start a new chapter in my life, one that would be full of love and respect for my growing family.
The morning started like any other. I rolled out of bed, the familiar sounds of my husband Jordan's gentle snoring filling the room. Padding across the cool hardwood floors, I made my way to the bathroom and splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess. As I glanced in the mirror, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A faint spotting, barely noticeable, but enough to set off alarm bells in my mind. I tried to push the worries aside, telling myself it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew better. Jordan and I had been trying for a baby for over a year now, and the constant disappointment had started to take its toll. Every month, the same cycle of hope followed by crushing despair. I tried to stay positive, focusing on my job as an elementary school teacher, but the longing for a child of our own was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Over breakfast, I debated whether or not to bring up my concerns to Jordan. He was always so supportive, but I could see the frustration in his eyes whenever the topic of children came up. It was as if he was starting to doubt whether it would ever happen for us. "Everything okay, babe?" Jordan asked, picking up on my distant gaze. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just lost in thought." He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't worry, it'll happen for us. We just have to be patient." His words were reassuring, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. What if something was wrong with me? What if I could never give Jordan the family he so desperately wanted? The day passed in a blur, my mind constantly drifting back to the spotting and the nagging fear that something wasn't right. By the time I got home from work, I had made up my mind. I needed to see a doctor, if only for peace of mind. Jordan was supportive, as always, but I could see the concern etched across his face. We sat in the doctor's office, holding hands tightly, bracing ourselves for whatever news was to come. "Mrs. West," the doctor said, her voice somber. The tests indicate that you're experiencing early ovarian aging. It's a condition that can make it difficult, if not impossible, to conceive naturally. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Impossible to conceive. My world came crashing down around me as I struggled to process the news. Jordan pulled me close, whispering reassurances in my ear, but I could sense a shift in his demeanor, a flicker of doubt, of disappointment that he quickly tried to mask. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for us. Could our love survive this devastating blow, or would the strain of infertility be too much for us to bear? Over the next few months, Jordan and I tried to remain positive, exploring every possible treatment option. He was supportive at first, holding my hand through the grueling rounds of fertility drugs and the invasive procedures that left me emotionally and physically drained. "We'll get through this together," he would say, pulling me close after another disappointing negative test result. But as time went on, I could sense a subtle shift in his demeanor. The reassuring smiles became more forced, the comforting words rang a little hollower. It was as if the constant disappointment was starting to wear him down too. One night, after another failed attempt at conceiving, Jordan let his guard down. "I just don't understand why this is so difficult," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "My parents had 4 kids without even trying." The words stung, reminding me of my own perceived inadequacy. I tried to brush it off, but the comment lingered in the back of my mind, planting seeds of doubt that would only continue to grow. As the weeks turned into months, the distance between us seemed to widen. Jordan began to bury himself in his work, coming home late and retreating to his home office for hours on end. I tried to be understanding, knowing that he was dealing with his own disappointment in his own way, but the loneliness was becoming unbearable. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed Jordan's phone lighting up with a text notification. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me pause. A nagging feeling, a voice in the back of my mind telling me to take a closer look. I shouldn't have done it. I knew it was a violation of his privacy, but the temptation was too strong. I picked up his phone and felt my heart sink as I read the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I'll bring the wine." The words seemed to jump off the screen, taunting me with their implications. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the conversation, each message more damning than the last. Jordan came home a few hours later, his eyes glazed over and his movements unsteady. The smell of perfume lingered on his clothes, a scent that wasn't mine. "Where have you been?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Out with some colleagues from work, we had a few drinks to celebrate a project launch." The lie was so blatant, so transparent, that it only added insult to injury. I wanted to scream, to rage against the betrayal, but the words caught in my throat. "I know about the texts, Jordan," I finally managed to choke out. "I know you're seeing someone else." For a moment he looked stunned, like a deer caught in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you think?" he sneered. "Maybe if you could give me a child, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for satisfaction." The cruelty of his words cut me to the core. In that moment, I saw the true depths of his selfishness, his willingness to place all the blame on me for our struggles. As he stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold and callous, someone capable of the ultimate betrayal. But even in my grief, a spark of determination began to flicker within me. Jordan may have thought he had the upper hand, but he had no idea what I was capable of. The game was just beginning, and I intended to play to win. The revelation of Jordan's infidelity hit me like a ton of bricks, but I refused to let it break me. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself retreating into a shell, isolating myself from friends and family as I grappled with the pain and betrayal. Jordan, for his part, seemed wholly unrepentant. He would come and go as he pleased, spending more and more time away from home, no doubt in the company of his mistress. The few times we did cross paths, the air was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. "Why are you doing this to us?" I finally worked up the courage to ask one evening as he was heading out the door. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, and turned to face me with a cold, emotionless stare. "Maybe if you could give me what I really want, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." The words cut deep, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt me. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely determination, silently vowing that he would pay for his cruelty. As the weeks dragged on, Jordan became increasingly brazen in his deception. He would come home late, reeking of cheap perfume and alcohol, and stumble off to bed without so much as a word. It was as if he had completely given up on even trying to hide his indiscretions. One night, as I sat alone in our living room, staring blankly at the flickering TV screen, I heard a faint, buzzing noise. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from Jordan's jacket pocket, which he had carelessly tossed over the back of the couch. Part of me knew I shouldn't look, that I was only setting myself up for more heartache. But another, more primal part of me couldn't resist the temptation. With trembling hands, I reached into the pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was lit up with a string of text messages, each one more damning than the last, explicit photos, suggestive comments, and promises of secret rendezvous that made my stomach churn. As I scrolled through the messages, a sense of rage began to build within me. How dare he? How dare he betray me in such a callous, brazen way? The man I had once loved, the man I had vowed to stand by through thick and thin, was nothing more than a snake in the grass, a selfish, deceitful coward. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let Jordan continue to humiliate and disrespect me. No, it was time to take matters into my own hands. If he wanted to play games, then I would play too, and I would make sure I came out on top. From that moment on, I became a woman possessed. I started keeping a meticulous log of Jordan's comings and goings, documenting his every lie and indiscretion. I gathered evidence, screenshots of the damning text messages, receipts for expensive gifts and hotel rooms that he had no doubt charged to our joint account. And all the while, I played the part of the oblivious, dutiful wife, lulling Jordan into a false sense of security. He had no idea that the ground was shifting beneath his feet, that his carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down around him. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but I was fueled by a burning desire for justice, for revenge. Jordan had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Little did he know, the true storm was only just beginning to brew. As the weeks passed, I found myself becoming consumed by my quest for revenge, meticulously gathering evidence of Jordan's misdeeds. But even as I built my case against him, a part of me still clung to the hope that it was all some terrible misunderstanding. That hope was shattered one night at a neighborhood party. Jordan and I had agreed to make an appearance, putting on a united front for the sake of appearances. As we mingled with our friends and neighbors, making small talk and sipping lukewarm beer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A petite blonde woman, no older than 25, sauntering across the room with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Our eyes met briefly, and she flashed me a sickly sweet smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Who's that?" I asked Jordan, trying to keep my voice casual. He followed my gaze, and I saw his expression shift ever so slightly. "Oh, that's Kaylee. She's new to the neighborhood." The way he said her name, the slight catch in his breath, told me everything I needed to know. This was the woman he had been seeing, the one he had been sneaking around with behind my back. As the party wore on, I found myself unable to take my eyes off of Kaylee. She moved through the crowd with ease, flirting shamelessly with any man who crossed her path, including Jordan. At one point, I caught them engaged in what appeared to be a heated conversation, their faces inches apart as they whispered back and forth. Kaylee's hand lingered a little too long on Jordan's arm, and I felt a surge of jealousy and anger coursing through my veins. When Jordan finally broke away and made his way back to me, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "So, who is she really?" I asked, my voice low and laced with accusation. Jordan's eyes widened, and he quickly tried to compose himself. "She's just a neighbor, babe. I was welcoming her to the community." The lie was so blatant, so insulting, that I felt myself shaking with rage. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Jordan. I saw the way she was touching you, the way you were looking at her." For a moment, he seemed caught off guard, like a deer in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "You want to know the truth?" he spat. "She's the woman who's going to give me what you can't. A family." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, my vision blurring with tears as the weight of his betrayal crashed down upon me. Jordan must have seen the pain in my eyes, because his expression softened ever so slightly. "Look, Lila, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. We both know it. Maybe it's time we face the fact that we want different things." I wanted to scream, to lash out at him for his callousness, his complete disregard for my feelings. But somehow, I found the strength to hold my tongue. "You're right, Jordan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It is time we faced the facts." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned and alone. As I made my way through the crowd, my mind was racing. Jordan had shown his true colors, and there was no going back. The gloves were off, and I was prepared to fight dirty if that's what it took to bring him down. Little did he know, I had been preparing for this moment all along. And when the time came, I would be ready to deliver the ultimate revenge. After the devastating confrontation at the neighborhood party, I knew I had to take action. Jordan had made it crystal clear that he was done with our marriage, that he was ready to move on and start a new life with his young mistress. But I wasn't about to let him off that easily. Not after everything he had put me through. For days, I seethed in silence, biding my time and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Jordan, emboldened by his admission, became even more brazen in his infidelity, spending nights away from home and making little effort to hide his liaisons with Kaylee. It was during one of these extended absences that I finally made my move. Using the wealth of evidence I had gathered over the past weeks, the incriminating text messages, the hotel receipts, even grainy photographs of Jordan and Kaylee in compromising positions, I began to piece together a damning case against him. I knew that if I wanted to truly hit him where it hurt, I needed to expose his betrayal in a way that would humiliate him, strip him of his false sense of superiority, and bring him crashing back down to earth. And so I hatched a plan. Late one night, after Jordan had once again failed to come home, I slipped out of the house and made my way to his office. I knew the security codes, the hidden spare key, all the little tricks he thought he had kept so carefully guarded. With trembling hands, I accessed his computer, rifling through files and folders until I found what I was looking for: his personal email and social media accounts, the digital lifeblood that he so carelessly left unprotected. One by one, I began forwarding the incriminating evidence to his closest friends and colleagues, his family members, even his boss. Explicit photos, damning text conversations, receipts for extravagant gifts and hotel stays, nothing was left out. And then, just for good measure, I took to his social media accounts, broadcasting his infidelity for the whole world to see. To my so-called husband Jordan West, I wrote, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound sense of empowerment. "This is the truth you've been so desperate to hide." I hit send, and just like that, the floodgates were open. Jordan's carefully curated facade came crumbling down, his sordid secrets laid bare for all to witness. As I made my way back home, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I knew that the fallout would be nuclear, that Jordan's world was about to implode in spectacular fashion. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. Jordan came stumbling in just before dawn, his shirt rumpled and his hair disheveled. He reeked of alcohol and cheap perfume, the telltale signs of another night spent in Kaylee's arms. He didn't even look at me as he staggered towards the bedroom, lost in his own drunken haze. It wasn't until later that morning, when his phone began to buzz incessantly with a barrage of calls and text messages, that the reality of what I had done began to sink in. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice thick with panic as he scrolled through the damning evidence that I had so carefully curated. I simply shrugged, a small, satisfied smile playing across my lips. "I believe the truth is finally out, Jordan." His eyes widened in horror as the full weight of my actions hit him. In that moment, I could see the arrogance, the smug sense of superiority draining from his face. "You're going to pay for this," he hissed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "No, Jordan," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's you who's going to pay." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath of my public exposure of Jordan's infidelity, the fallout was swift and brutal. His once thriving career lay in tatters, his reputation irreparably damaged by the sordid details I had so meticulously laid bare. Friends and family members who had once rallied around him now turned their backs, disgusted by his betrayal. Even his own parents, once so proud and doting, could barely bring themselves to look him in the eye. As for me, I found myself riding a wave of vindication, basking in the knowledge that I had finally taken back control of my life, my dignity. Jordan had thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, but I had proven him wrong in spectacular fashion. Still, there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to be put into place. A few weeks after the explosive revelation, Jordan and I found ourselves seated in the familiar waiting room of our fertility doctor's office. The air between us was thick with tension, a palpable sense of animosity that had only grown more pronounced in the wake of my retaliation. "Mrs. West, the doctor will see you now," the receptionist called out, her voice laced with a hint of pity that made my skin crawl. Jordan rose to his feet, shooting me a venomous glare as he brushed past me and made his way towards the examination room. I followed closely behind, steeling myself for what was to come. Well, what a pleasure to see you both again," the doctor said, her tone dripping with sarcasm as we took our seats. "I must say, your personal lives have certainly been eventful as of late." Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw clenched tightly. "Can we just cut to the chase, Doc? I'm sure you didn't call us here to gossip." The doctor arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his bravado. "Very well, then. Mr. West, after reviewing your latest test results, I'm afraid I have some rather unfortunate news." She paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. "It appears that you are suffering from a severe case of male factor infertility. Your sperm count and motility levels are well below the normal range, making it highly unlikely that you would be able to conceive a child naturally." The room seemed to spin around me as the doctor's words sank in. Jordan, the man who had so callously blamed me for our inability to have children, the man who had sought solace in the arms of another woman in pursuit of his dream family. He was the one with the fertility issue all along. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Jordan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he spat. "After everything, after all the hell you've put me through, you're trying to pull this stunt?" The doctor's expression hardened. "I assure you, Mr. West, this is no stunt. The test results are conclusive, and they speak for themselves." Jordan opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, unable to contain the fury that was bubbling up inside me. "You know, Jordan, I almost feel sorry for you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "All this time you've been pointing the finger at me, accusing me of being the reason we couldn't have children. You let your own selfishness and insecurity drive you into the arms of another woman, all because you were too blind to see the truth." His eyes widened as the realization began to sink in, the weight of his own lies and betrayal crashing down upon him. You knew," he stammered, his face pale. "This whole time, you knew." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Of course I knew. Did you really think I was going to let you get away with what you did to me, to us?" The doctor cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding confrontation. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, when emotions have had a chance to settle." But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "No, doctor, I think it's time Jordan heard the full truth," I said, turning to face him head-on. "You see, while you were off gallivanting with that little tramp, I was busy collecting evidence. Every sordid detail, every dirty little secret. I have it all." Jordan's face drained of color as the weight of my words sank in. In that moment, he knew he had been beaten at his own game, outmaneuvered and outsmarted by the very woman he had so callously discarded. "And now, thanks to your own carelessness, the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I continued, relishing in the look of abject horror on his face. A liar, a cheat, a coward who was too weak to face his own shortcomings. Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. For once in his life, he was utterly speechless, stripped of his bravado and left to confront the harsh reality of his own actions. As we left the doctor's office, Jordan trailing behind me like a wounded animal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been long and hard fought, but in the end justice had prevailed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. In the days following the devastating revelation of Jordan's infertility, I found myself riding a wave of vindication and triumph. After months of being gaslit and betrayed, the tables had finally turned, and Jordan was the one left reeling in the aftermath of his own lies and deceit. But my quest for justice was far from over. As word of Jordan's indiscretions spread like wildfire through our small community, I knew I had to strike while the iron was hot. I had already exposed him to our closest friends and colleagues, but there were still those who remained blissfully unaware of the true depths of his betrayal. And so, I hatched a plan, one that would ensure Jordan's humiliation was complete and inescapable. It was a warm summer evening when I invited both of our families over for a casual get-together. Jordan, still reeling from the bombshell I had dropped at the doctor's office, was in no position to protest. One by one, our loved ones trickled in, exchanging pleasantries and sipping on cool drinks as the golden sun dipped below the horizon. Jordan plastered on a forced smile, doing his best to maintain the illusion of normalcy despite the palpable tension in the air. Little did they know, I had already set the stage for the ultimate reveal. As the night wore on and the conversations began to flow more freely, I seized my opportunity. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass with a fork, commanding the attention of the room. "Friends, family, thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady and confident. "I know these past few months have been trying for all of us, but I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Jordan's eyes went wide, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the arms of his chair. He knew what was coming, but he was powerless to stop it. "You see, for a long time I believed that our struggles to conceive were my fault," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the rapt faces of our guests. "Jordan led me to believe that I was the one with the fertility issues, that my body was letting us down." A collective gasp rippled through the room, and I could see the looks of pity and concern etched on their faces. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "But the truth is, Jordan was the one who was unable to give me the child I so desperately wanted," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "He was the one who was shooting blanks, so to speak." Jordan let out a strangled sound, his face flushing a deep crimson as the gravity of my words sank in. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And instead of being honest with me, instead of facing the truth like a man, he chose to betray me in the worst possible way. I paused for effect, letting the weight of my next words linger in the air. "He cheated on me, with a woman half his age, no less." The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs, eyes darting between Jordan and me in disbelief. "That's a lie!" Jordan shouted, shooting to his feet in a rage. "She's twisting the truth, manipulating all of you." But it was too late. With a few deft taps on my phone, I had already set my plan in motion. Suddenly, the room was filled with the unmistakable sounds of Jordan's voice, captured in a damning audio recording I had made during one of our many heated arguments. "You're never going to be able to give me what I really want." His voice crackled through the speakers, laced with venom. "A real family, with kids of my own. Maybe it's time we face the facts. This marriage is over." A deafening silence fell over the room as the recording faded out, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. "You see, Jordan thought he could have it all," I said, my voice ringing out in the stillness. "He thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, all in pursuit of his twisted dream of starting a new family with his mistress." I let the words hang in the air, letting them sink in for all to hear. But what he didn't count on was me fighting back. He never expected me to uncover the truth about his own infertility, his own lies and deceptions. Jordan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was utterly defeated, laid bare before the very people he had once tried so hard to impress. As our loved ones filed out one by one, casting disgusted glances in Jordan's direction, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice had prevailed. And as I watched Jordan slink away, his head hung in shame, I knew that my quest for revenge was finally complete. In the aftermath of my explosive revelation, Jordan's world came crashing down around him. His once promising career was left in tatters, his reputation irreparably tarnished by the sordid details of his infidelity and deception. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach Kaylee, the young mistress who had so brazenly inserted herself into our marriage. As the truth of Jordan's lies and my vengeance came to light, she was quickly cast aside, reduced to a mere footnote in the twisted saga of our unraveling. I'll never forget the look on her face when she realized the depths of Jordan's betrayal, not just towards me, but towards her as well. The tears streamed down her cheeks as she confronted him, demanding answers that he simply couldn't provide. "You told me you were going to leave her," she had sobbed, her voice thick with anger and heartbreak. "You said we were going to have a family together." Jordan, for once, was rendered speechless. The mask of arrogance and bravado he had worn for so long had finally slipped away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "Kaylee, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. "It's not what you think." But she wasn't having any of it. With a strength I didn't know she possessed, she gathered her things and stormed out, leaving Jordan to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. As for me, I found myself, slowly but surely, picking up the pieces of my shattered life. The road to healing was a long and arduous one, but with each passing day I could feel the weight of Jordan's betrayal lifting from my shoulders. I threw myself into my work, pouring my heart and soul into teaching and connecting with my students in a way I never had before. Their smiling faces, their boundless energy and enthusiasm became a balm for my wounded spirit. And slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my social circles, surrounding myself with people who truly cared for me, friends and family members who had stood by me through the darkest of times. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the pain and anger threatened to consume me once again. But I was determined to emerge from this experience stronger, more resilient, and more grateful for the people and things that truly mattered. As for Jordan, his fall from grace was as spectacular as it was well-deserved. Without the support of his family and friends, and with his professional reputation in tatters, he found himself adrift, grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his life. The last time I saw him was at the courthouse, where we had gathered to finalize the terms of our divorce. He looked like a shell of his former self, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, hollow gaze. "Lila," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached me in the hallway. I don't know what to say." I regarded him coolly, my heart hardened by the months of pain and betrayal he had put me through. "Then don't say anything," I replied, my voice firm and unwavering. "You've said more than enough already." He opened his mouth as if to protest, but the words seemed to die on his lips. Instead, he simply nodded, a flicker of resignation passing across his face, and with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing from my life for good. In the months and years that followed, I found myself gradually letting go of the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Jordan's transgressions, while painful, no longer held the same power over me. I had emerged from the ashes of our failed marriage like a phoenix, reborn and reinvigorated, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms. And as I looked towards the future, one thing was certain. I would never again allow myself to be defined by the actions of others, nor would I ever let someone like Jordan take away my sense of self-worth and dignity. I was my own woman, strong and resilient, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever change that. The diamond on my finger caught the light, sending sparkles dancing across the pristine white tablecloth. I couldn't help but smile, twisting the ring back and forth, still not quite believing it was there. After 10 years, Michael had finally proposed. "Emily, dear, you're positively glowing." Eleanor, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm so thrilled," Michael finally popped the question. "Lord knows I've been dropping hints for years." I laughed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Trust me, Eleanor, I've been dropping hints too. But you know Michael, always moving at his own pace. Eleanor's smile faltered for just a moment, so quickly I almost missed it. She took a sip of her tea, her perfectly manicured nails clinking against the delicate china. Yes, well, that's my Michael. Always been a bit stubborn. Something in her tone made me pause. Is everything all right, Eleanor? She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, of course, dear. It's just... She leaned in, lowering her voice. There's something you should know about our family. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My heart started to race. What is it? Eleanor glanced around the crowded restaurant as if checking for eavesdroppers. It's about Michael's father. The story he's told you, well, it's not entirely true. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? Michael said his father died when he was young. That's what Michael believes, Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the truth is, his father left us, abandoned us when Michael was just a baby. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What? But... Why would Michael lie about that? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. He doesn't know, Emily. I told him his father died. I couldn't bear for him to know the truth. My mind was reeling. How could Michael not know something so fundamental about his own life? And why had Eleanor kept this secret for so long? Before I could ask any more questions, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. Where are you? Thought we were meeting at 2? I glanced at my watch and cursed under my breath. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I completely lost track of time. I'm supposed to be meeting Michael to look at venues. Eleanor nodded, composing herself quickly. Of course, dear. Go. We can talk more later. As I gathered my things, Eleanor grabbed my wrist. Emily, please, don't say anything to Michael. Not yet. Let me be the one to tell him. I hesitated, torn between my loyalty to Michael and the pleading look in Eleanor's eyes. Finally, I nodded. All right. But soon, okay? He deserves to know. Eleanor smiled gratefully. Thank you, dear. You're going to make a wonderful addition to our family. As I hurried out of the restaurant, my mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Joy at my engagement warred with the shock of Eleanor's revelation. How well did I really know the man I was about to marry? I spotted Michael waiting outside the first venue on our list, looking handsome as ever in his tailored suit. He grinned when he saw me, pulling me in for a kiss. There's my beautiful fiancé, he said. Ready to start planning our future? I forced a smile, pushing down the guilt and confusion roiling in my stomach. Of course, let's go. As we walked into the venue, hand in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that our perfect love story was about to get a lot more complicated. I stared at my phone, my heart sinking as I read Michael's text. Sorry, babe. Can't make it to the florist today. Work emergency. This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks he'd canceled our wedding preparations. I sighed, tossing the phone onto the couch. The excitement of planning our big day was quickly turning into frustration and doubt. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Eleanor standing there, a sympathetic smile on her face. Emily, dear, I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought you might need some company today. I felt a rush of gratitude. Eleanor, you're a lifesaver. Please, come in. As we settled in the living room with cups of tea, Eleanor asked, So how are the wedding plans coming along? I couldn't hold back anymore. The words tumbled out in a rush. Honestly, they're not. Michael keeps canceling on me. It's like he doesn't even care about the wedding. Eleanor's face softened with concern. Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure that's not true. Michael can be difficult sometimes, but he loves you. I nodded, not entirely convinced. I know. It's just, ever since you told me about his father, I can't help but wonder what else I don't know about him. Eleanor reached out and squeezed my hand. Emily, I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause trouble between you two. Perhaps I shouldn't have said anything. No, I said firmly. I'm glad you told me. I just wish Michael would open up to me more. We spent the next hour talking, Eleanor sharing stories about Michael's childhood that made me laugh and reminded me why I fell in love with him. By the time she left, I felt a little better, but the nagging doubt remained. That evening Michael came home late, looking tired and distracted. Hey, I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. How was your work emergency? He barely glanced at me as he loosened his tie. Oh, yeah, just a client freaking out about nothing. You know how it is. I took a deep breath. Michael, We need to talk about the wedding. You keep canceling our appointments, and I'm starting to feel like I'm planning this whole thing alone. He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of guilt and irritation. Come on, Em. You know how busy I am at work. Can't you handle this stuff? His dismissive tone sparked something in me. This is our wedding, Michael. Not just mine. It should be important to both of us. Michael's face hardened. Of course it's important to me. I just don't see why we need to make such a big deal out of every little detail. We argued back and forth, our voices rising until we were both shouting. Finally, Michael grabbed his keys. I need some air, he snapped, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. How had we gone from the joy of our engagement to this in just a few short weeks? My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Checking in, hope everything's okay. Without thinking, I called her back. Eleanor? I choked out between sobs. Can you come over? I really need someone to talk to. Of course, dear, she said without hesitation. I'll be right there. As I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I should be talking to Michael, working things out with him. Instead, I was turning to his mother for comfort. But as I waited for Eleanor to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that she understood me better than Michael did right now, and that thought terrified me more than anything else. The clock on the nightstand glared at me, 2:37 a.m. I rolled over, the empty space beside me, a cold reminder of Michael's absence. This was the third night this week he'd stayed out late, claiming it was just innocent fun with the guys. Bachelor's last hurrah, he'd said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I grabbed my phone, thumb hovering over Michael's name. No, I decided. I wouldn't be that person, constantly checking up on him. Instead, I opened my messages with Eleanor. You awake? I typed, then immediately regretted it. What kind of soon-to-be daughter-in-law texts her fiancé's mother in the middle of the night? To my surprise, a reply came almost instantly. Can't sleep either? Want to talk? Relief washed over me. Michael's out again. I'm worried. Come over for breakfast tomorrow. We'll chat. The next morning, I found myself sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands. I don't know what to do, I confessed. It's like Michael's a different person lately. Eleanor's face was a mask of concern. Has he said anything about his father? I shook my head. No, and I haven't brought it up. I'm scared it'll just make things worse. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never meant for my secret to cause such trouble. It's not your fault, I assured her, but I can't help feeling like there's something Michael's not telling me. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Where are you? Woke up and you were gone. I showed Eleanor the message, my frustration bubbling over. He's one to talk. He didn't even come home last night. Eleanor's expression hardened. This isn't like Michael. Something's not right. As I typed a reply, another text came through. This one made my blood run cold. Who's Vanessa? Why does she keep calling you? I stared at the screen, confusion and anger warring inside me. Eleanor, I don't know any Vanessa. What is he talking about? Eleanor's face paled. Oh, dear, I think I might know who Vanessa is. My heart raced. What? Who? She hesitated, then said softly, Vanessa is Michael's father's new wife. The room spun. What? But you said his father left when Michael was a baby. How could he? I'm so sorry, Emily. There's more to the story than I told you. Michael's father, he's been trying to reconnect. I've been keeping his messages from Michael, trying to protect him. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So all this time, Michael's father has been alive? Trying to contact him, and you've been hiding it. Eleanor nodded, tears in her eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now, with Michael acting so strangely, I'm afraid he might have found out somehow. My mind raced. Could this explain Michael's recent behavior? The late nights, the secretiveness? Was he meeting with his long-lost father behind my back? I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. I need to talk to Michael. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Emily, wait, please be careful. Michael, he can be like his father sometimes. Unpredictable when he's upset. Her words sent a chill down my spine. What exactly was she implying? As I drove home, my emotions swirled like a storm. Anger at Michael for lying, at Eleanor for keeping secrets, at myself for not seeing what was happening right in front of me. I pulled into our driveway, steeling myself for the confrontation to come. But as I opened the front door, I froze. The house was in chaos. Drawers pulled out, contents strewn across the floor. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Michael, a suitcase at his feet and a wild look in his eyes. "Michael," I whispered, fear gripping my heart. "What's going on?" He turned to me, his face a mask of pain and fury. "I know everything, Emily. About my father, about the lies, and I know you've been talking to my mother behind my back." As he advanced towards me, I realized with terrifying clarity that I didn't know this man at all. And I had no idea what he was capable of. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I stood before the mirror, my white dress a ghostly reflection of the bride I was supposed to be. But all I could see were the shadows of doubt in my eyes. Last night's confrontation with Michael played on repeat in my mind. His anger, his accusations, the way he'd grabbed my arm when I tried to leave. In the end, he'd broken down, sobbing about his father's betrayal and begging for forgiveness. We'd talked for hours and he'd promised to be better, to be honest from now on. But as I adjusted my veil, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making a terrible mistake. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Emily?" Eleanor's voice called. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then called out, "Yes, come in." Eleanor entered, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. "Oh, Emily, you look beautiful." I tried to smile, but it felt forced. "Thank you, Eleanor." She approached me, her face etched with concern. "Are you sure about this, dear? After everything that's happened?" I turned back to the mirror, avoiding her gaze. "Michael explained everything. He was just upset about his father. We're going to work through it together." Eleanor's reflection frowned. "Emily, I know my son. He's not always—" "Please," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "I've made my decision." Eleanor nodded, her eyes sad. "All right, dear. I just want you to be happy." As she left, I felt a pang of guilt. Eleanor had become such a source of comfort these past weeks, but she was still Michael's mother. I couldn't keep relying on her. The ceremony was a blur. I walked down the aisle, my eyes locked on Michael. He looked handsome in his tux, his smile bright and reassuring. But as I reached him, I noticed a slight tremor in his hands. We exchanged vows, Michael's voice steady as he promised love and fidelity. When it was my turn, I hesitated for just a moment, my doubts threatening to choke me. But I pushed through, the words leaving my lips even as my heart raced with uncertainty. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and Michael pulled me in for a kiss. The small crowd of family and friends applauded, but it sounded distant and muffled to my ears. At the reception, I plastered on a smile, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. But my eyes kept drifting to Michael, watching as he downed glass after glass of champagne. "Are you okay?" I whispered during a quiet moment. He grinned, his eyes slightly unfocused. "Never better, babe. We did it." As the night wore on, Michael became more boisterous, his laughter too loud, his movements unsteady. I saw Eleanor watching him with a mix of concern and resignation. Finally, as the last guests were leaving, Michael stumbled, nearly knocking over the gift table. I rushed to steady him, the smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. "I think it's time we went home," I said softly. He laughed, pulling me close. "Home? But the party's just getting started." I extricated myself from his grip, my patience wearing thin. "Michael, please, you're drunk." His face darkened. "Don't tell me what I am," he snapped, loud enough for the remaining guests to turn and stare. Embarrassment and anger flooded through me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt like I was drowning. Eleanor appeared at my side, her hand on my arm. "Let me help you get him home," she offered quietly. I nodded, too tired to argue. As we maneuvered a protesting Michael into the car, Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Remember, Emily," she said, her voice low and urgent, "you always have a choice." As we drove away, Michael already passed out in the back seat, her words echoed in my mind. A choice. But what choice did I have now? I was married, for better or for worse. Looking at Michael's slumped form in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the worse I'd signed up for? And if so, how much worse could it get? I zipped up the last suitcase, my heart fluttering with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Our honeymoon to Bali was just hours away, a chance to escape the tension of the past few weeks and start our married life on a positive note. Maybe, just maybe, this trip would be the fresh start Michael and I desperately needed. As I wheeled the luggage to the front door, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, honey," I answered, trying to keep my voice light. "Are you on your way home? Our flight's in 4 hours." There was a pause, then Michael's voice came through, strained and hesitant. I have some bad news." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "It's my mom," he said. "She's in the hospital. Some kind of sudden illness. I'm with her now." I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. "Oh my God, is she okay? What happened?" "The doctors aren't sure yet," Michael replied. "But I don't think we can go on our honeymoon, not with Mom like this." The words hit me like a physical blow. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of frustration and disbelief. "Michael, are you sure? Can't your sister stay with her? We've been planning this trip for months." I know, he said, his voice rising. "But she's my mother, Emily. I can't just leave her like this." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "Okay, I understand. Should I come to the hospital?" "No," Michael said quickly, then softened his tone. "No, that's okay. You stay home. I'll call you with updates." As I hung up, a nagging doubt crept into my mind. Something about Michael's tone, the way he'd refused my offer to come to the hospital, it didn't sit right. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed Eleanor's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. I frowned, my unease growing. I paced the living room, my mind racing. What if Eleanor wasn't really sick? What if this was just another of Michael's lies? But why would he lie about this? Hours passed, and still no word from Michael. My calls went straight to voicemail. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital. At the reception, I asked for Eleanor's room number, only to be met with confusion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the nurse said, "but we don't have any patient by that name." My world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. My husband said she was admitted this morning." The nurse shook her head sympathetically. "I've been on shift all day. No, Eleanor has been admitted." I stumbled out of the hospital, my mind in chaos. Michael had lied. Again. But why? Where was he really? As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number, but the content made my blood run cold. "Your husband isn't who you think he is. Meet me at the Bluebird Cafe in an hour if you want the truth. V. Vanessa, Michael's father's new wife, the woman at the center of all this chaos." I stood in the hospital parking lot, the weight of decision heavy on my shoulders. Should I meet this mysterious Vanessa? Should I confront Michael? Or should I finally listen to that voice inside me that had been screaming for weeks, telling me to run? My fingers hovered over my phone, ready to reply to the text. In that moment, I knew my decision would change everything. There was no going back from here. With a deep breath, I typed my response, sealing my fate with 4 simple words. "I'll be there. Emily." As I got into my car, heading towards the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a ruined honeymoon. This was the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the man I thought I loved. My hands trembled as I pushed open the door to the Bluebird Cafe. The aroma of coffee and pastries did nothing to calm my frayed nerves. I scanned the room, my heart pounding, until I spotted a woman in the corner booth. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I knew instantly this was Vanessa. As I slid into the seat across from her, she spoke first. "Emily, I presume? Thank you for coming." I nodded, studying her face. She was beautiful, with an air of confidence that made me feel instantly inadequate. "You said you had the truth about Michael. I'm listening." Vanessa sighed, pushing a manila folder across the table. "Everything you need to know is in here, but I warn you, it's not pretty." With shaking hands, I opened the folder. Photos spilled out. Michael with another woman, laughing, kissing. Dates stamped in the corner showed this wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for months. "Who is she?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "His secretary," Vanessa replied. "But that's not all. Keep reading." I flipped through documents, bank statements, emails, even a copy of a lease agreement. The pieces started to fall into place, each revelation more devastating than the last. "He's been embezzling from his company," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "And he's planning to leave the country?" Vanessa nodded grimly. "With her? The honeymoon cancellation? It was just an excuse. He's planning to disappear with the money and his mistress." I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal. "But why? Why tell me all this? Because Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes intense. Michael isn't just hurting you, he's hurting everyone around him, including his father, my husband. We want to stop him before it's too late. Just then, my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice shaky. Eleanor? Emily, dear. I've been trying to reach you. Is everything all right? Michael said you two had to cancel your honeymoon because of me, but I'm perfectly fine. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I ended the call, my mind racing. She's not sick. She never was. Vanessa's expression was a mix of sympathy and determination. Now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I stood up abruptly, a plan forming in my mind. I'm going to confront him. And then I'm going on that honeymoon, but not with Michael. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? A grim smile played on my lips. I'm taking Eleanor instead. Let's see how Michael likes it when his lies catch up to him. I rushed home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions and plans. As I burst through the door, I found Michael packing a suitcase. "Em," he exclaimed, surprise and guilt flashing across his face. "I thought you'd be out. I was just—" "Packing for our canceled honeymoon?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe for your little getaway with your secretary." The color drained from Michael's face. "What are you talking about?" I threw the folder on the bed, photos and documents scattering. "I know everything, Michael. The affair, the embezzlement, all of it." He lunged for the folder, but I was quicker. I snatched it back, backing away. "Don't even think about it. It's over, Michael. I'm leaving and I'm taking everything we have. You'll have nothing left when I'm done." Michael's expression morphed from shock to anger. He advanced towards me, his fists clenched. "You can't do this to me. I won't let you." Fear coursed through me, but I stood my ground. "Try and stop me. I dare you." As Michael raised his hand, the front door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, her face a mask of fury. "Michael Andrew Thompson, don't you dare touch her!" Michael froze, his eyes darting between Eleanor and me. I took advantage of his confusion, grabbing my pre-packed suitcase. "Come on, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "We have a plane to catch." As we walked out, leaving a stunned Michael behind, I felt a strange mix of pain, relief, and exhilaration. The life I thought I knew was over, but a new chapter was just beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The moment I stepped through our front door, the tension in the air was palpable. Michael sat on the couch, his face a mask of barely contained anger. Our impromptu honeymoon with Eleanor had given me time to gather my thoughts, but nothing could have prepared me for this confrontation. "Welcome home," Michael said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you enjoy your little vacation with my mother?" I dropped my suitcase, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "Cut the act, Michael. We both know what's really going on here." He stood, his eyes flashing dangerously. "Oh, and what exactly is that, Emily?" "Your affair, for starters," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "And let's not forget the embezzlement. Did you really think you could just run away with your secretary and all that stolen money?" Michael's face paled, then flushed with anger. "Who told you? Was it Vanessa? That meddling bitch?" "It doesn't matter who told me," I shot back. "What matters is that it's true, isn't it, Michael?" He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You don't understand. I had no choice." I wrenched away from him, my heart pounding. "No choice? You had every choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. I did it for us," he yelled, his composure crumbling. "For our future," I laughed bitterly. "Our future. There is no our anymore, Michael. You destroyed that the moment you decided to betray me." Suddenly the door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, followed by a man I'd never seen before. Michael's face drained of all color. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice small and uncertain. The man, Michael's father, stepped forward, his face a mix of sadness and determination. "It's time to face the music, son." Michael's eyes darted between us all, like a cornered animal. "You don't understand, any of you. I was going to make it right. I just needed more time." "More time for what?" I demanded. "More lies? More betrayal?" Eleanor moved to my side, her hand on my shoulder. "Emily, dear, I'm so sorry. I never imagined Michael would go this far." As the reality of the situation crashed down around us, Michael's facade finally crumbled. He sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far." but his words rang hollow in my ears. The man I thought I knew, the man I had loved for 10 years and married just weeks ago, was a stranger to me now. "It's over, Michael," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I want a divorce." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Emily, please. We can work this out. I'll make it right, I swear." I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "No, Michael. You've had your chances. I'm done." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers entered, their faces grim. "Michael Thompson?" one of them said. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and fraud." As they read him his rights and led him away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, sadness, anger, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The life I thought I had, the future I had planned, it was all gone in an instant. Eleanor wrapped her arm around me as we watched Michael being driven away. "What will you do now, dear?" she asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling both terrified and strangely liberated. "I don't know," I admitted. "But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can finally start living for myself." As the police car disappeared around the corner, I realized that this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with uncertainty, but also with the promise of freedom and self-discovery. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to the end of my marriage and the beginning of my new life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what lay ahead. Eleanor's reassuring hand on my shoulder gave me the strength to push open the heavy doors. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Michael for the first time since his arrest. He looked haggard, his once confident demeanor replaced by a shell of a man. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt a twinge of something. Not love, not anymore, but a complex mixture of pity, anger, and regret. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and formalities. I barely registered the words until the judge addressed me directly. "Mrs. Thompson, do you wish to make a statement before the court renders its decision?" I stood, my legs shaky but my resolve firm. "Yes, Your Honor." As I faced the courtroom, I saw not just Michael, but the faces of those whose lives he'd affected, his parents, our friends, even his former secretary, who looked as broken as I felt. 10 years ago, I fell in love with a man I thought I knew, I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. I built my life around him, dreamed of a future with him, but that man never truly existed. Instead, I married a stranger, a liar, a cheater, a thief. Michael flinched at my words, but I pressed on. I stand here today not just as a victim of his crimes, but as a survivor. I've lost my marriage, my trust, and the future I thought I'd have. But I've gained something too, the truth and the strength to face it. I turned to Michael, meeting his gaze head on. "I forgive you, Michael. Not for your sake, but for mine. I refuse to let your betrayal define me or my future." As I sat down, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Michael was sentenced to prison for his financial crimes, and our divorce was granted. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor enveloped me in a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you, Emily," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I pulled back, studying her face. "Eleanor, I don't know how to thank you for everything." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Oh, my dear, you don't need to thank me. Your family, no matter what." Those words, so simple yet so profound, broke something open inside me. I began to sob, releasing all the pain, anger, and fear I'd been holding on to for so long. Eleanor held me, her presence a balm to my battered soul. As my tears subsided, I realized something fundamental had shifted within me. The betrayal still hurt, the wounds were still raw, but I was no longer defined by them. I was more than Michael's ex-wife, more than a victim of his deceit. I was Emily, strong, resilient, and ready to write my own story. "What now?" Eleanor asked gently as we walked away from the courthouse. I took a deep breath, feeling the warm sun on my face and the promise of possibility in the air. Now I start over. I find out who I am without Michael, without the lies and the doubt. Eleanor squeezed my hand. "And you won't be alone. I'll be right here every step of the way." I smiled, feeling a genuine spark of hope for the first time in months. I know. And that means more to me than you could ever know. As we drove away, leaving behind the shattered remains of my old life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But I was ready to face them, armed with the truth, supported by unexpected friendships, and fueled by a newfound belief in myself. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had also set me free. And in that freedom, I found the strength to embrace the unknown, to forgive without forgetting, and to love again, starting with myself. As Eleanor and I planned a celebratory dinner, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful relationships can bloom from the ashes of betrayal. My story wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time I would be the author of my own happily ever after. You're nothing without me, Evelyn. Remember that. Dominic's words cut deep as I cradle our newborn daughter, Aria. I look down at her innocent face, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I feel a wave of despair wash over me. How did I get here? How did I let myself become so trapped, so helpless? I've always been a strong, independent woman, but Dominic has a way of making me feel small and insignificant. Since Aria's birth, his controlling behavior has escalated to new heights. He dictates my every move, from what I wear to who I can see. He even controls our finances, leaving me completely dependent on during my maternity leave. I'm going out, Dominic announces, grabbing his keys from the counter. I expect dinner to be ready when I get back. I nod silently, not daring to argue. I've learned the hard way that defiance only leads to more pain. As the door slams behind him, I let out a shaky breath and hug Aria closer to my chest. I think back to the early days of our relationship when Dominic seemed like the perfect man. Charming, successful, and attentive, he swept me off my feet. Our whirlwind romance led to a quick marriage, and before I knew it, I was pregnant with Aria. But now, as I sit alone in our lavish apartment, surrounded by all the trappings of wealth, I feel more trapped than ever. Dominic's true colors have emerged, and I'm left wondering how I ever fell for his facade. A sudden cry from Aria jolts me back to the present. I rock her gently, whispering soothing words as I try to calm her. But even as I comfort my daughter, I can feel the weight of Dominic's control bearing down on me. I glance at the clock, realizing I only have a few hours before he returns. I need to start dinner, but the thought of facing another evening of his criticism and verbal abuse makes my stomach churn. As I lay Aria down in her crib, I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me is a shell of her former self. Dark circles under her eyes, a forced smile masking the pain. I hardly recognize her, but as I watch Aria drift off to sleep, a flicker of determination sparks within me. I can't let my daughter grow up thinking this is normal, that this is what love looks like. I need to find a way out, not just for myself, but for her. I take a deep breath and straighten my shoulders. I may feel trapped and helpless now, but I refuse to let Dominic break me. I will find a way to escape his grasp, to build a better life for Aria and myself. As I head to the kitchen to start dinner, I silently vow to myself that this will be the last meal I cook under Dominic's roof. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but I will find the strength to break free from this nightmare. For Aria's sake, and for my own, I have to. As I sit in the darkness of Aria's nursery, my mind drifts back to the beginning of my relationship with Dominic. It all seemed so perfect, like a fairy tale come to life. I was 28, a successful young woman with a promising career when I met him at a charity event. He was 35, charming, and incredibly handsome. I was instantly smitten. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners, lavish gifts, and grand gestures. Dominic made me feel like I was the center of his universe. He promised me the world, and I believed every word. "Evelyn, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he whispered in my ear as we danced at a gala. "I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." I melted into his arms, convinced that I had found my soulmate. When he proposed just 3 months later, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Our wedding was a grand affair, with no expense spared. I felt like a princess as I walked down the aisle in my designer gown, Dominic waiting for me at the altar with a smile that could light up the room. "I love you, Evelyn," he said as he slipped the ring on my finger. "I promise to cherish you forever." I believed him with all my heart. We settled into married life, and for a while everything was perfect. Dominic continued to shower me with attention and gifts, and I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But then, just a few months into our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. I was overjoyed, but Dominic's reaction was not what I expected. A baby now? He asked, his brow furrowed. I thought we agreed to wait a few years. I was taken aback by his response. We had discussed starting a family, but I didn't realize he had such a specific timeline in mind. I know it's a bit sooner than we planned, but isn't it wonderful news? I asked, trying to gauge his reaction. Dominic's face softened, and he pulled me into an embrace. Of course it is, darling. I'm just surprised, that's all. We'll make it work. But as my pregnancy progressed, I began to notice subtle changes in Dominic's behavior. He became more controlling, more possessive. He started questioning my every move, demanding to know where I was and who I was with at all times. I chalked it up to nerves about impending fatherhood and tried to reassure him that everything would be fine. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me that something wasn't right. When Aria was born, Dominic's behavior only intensified. He criticized everything I did, from the way I changed her diaper to the way I held her. He insisted on being present for every feeding, every bath time, every moment of her life. At first, I thought he was just being an attentive father. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized that his attention was more about control than love. You're doing it wrong, he would snap as I tried to soothe Aria's cries. Give her to me. I'll show you how it's done. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to anticipate his every mood and whim. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but I didn't dare complain. I was afraid of what he might do if I pushed back. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed. The way he isolated me from my friends and family, the way he made me feel like I was nothing without him. I was so blinded by love that I couldn't see the truth. But now, as I sit in the darkness, watching my daughter sleep, I know I can't let this continue. I have to find a way out, not just for myself, but for Aria. She deserves a better life than this. I just hope I have the strength to do what needs to be done. Aria's cries pierce the night, and I stumble out of bed, exhausted. It's been weeks since I've had a full night's sleep, and the toll is starting to show. As I enter the nursery, I find Dominic already there, holding our daughter. I've got this, he says, his voice cold. Go back to bed. I hesitate, wanting to comfort my own child, but the look in Dominic's eyes tells me not to argue. I retreat to our bedroom, feeling helpless and alone. The next morning, I'm in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Dominic storms in, his face contorted with anger. Why isn't the laundry done? He demands, holding up a shirt. I have a big meeting today, and I need this pressed. I glance at the clock, realizing I've lost track of time while caring for Aria. I'm sorry, I'll do it right now, I say, reaching for the shirt, but Dominic yanks it away, his eyes narrowing. You're always making excuses. He sneers. I work hard to provide for this family, and you can't even handle simple household chores. I feel my cheeks burn with shame and frustration. I'm doing the best I can, I protest weakly. Dominic scoffs. Your best isn't good enough. I deserve better than this. He storms out of the kitchen, leaving me fighting back tears. I know I should stand up for myself, but I'm too tired, too beaten down. Later that day, I'm trying to soothe a fussy Aria when the phone rings. It's the bank, informing me that my credit card has been declined. Confused, I hang up and log into our online banking account. What I see makes my blood run cold. Our savings account, the one I thought we were using for Aria's college fund, is nearly empty. Thousands of dollars, gone without a trace. I confront Dominic that evening, holding up the bank statement with shaking hands. What is this? I demand. Where did all our money go? Dominic barely glances at the paper before shrugging. I had some expenses come up. Business stuff you wouldn't understand. Business stuff? I echo, incredulous. Dominic, that was our daughter's college fund. How could you just spend it without telling me? He fixes me with a cold stare. I don't have to tell you anything. I'm the one who earns the money in this family. I'll spend it how I see fit. I reel back as if slapped. But we're supposed to be partners, I whisper. We should make these decisions together. Dominic laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. Partners? You're nothing without me, Evelyn. I gave you everything. This house, those clothes, that baby. You owe me. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Is this what our marriage has become? A transaction? A debt to be paid? I turn away, fighting back tears. I'm going to put Aria to bed, I say, my voice trembling. As I rock my daughter to sleep, I feel a sense of despair wash over me. How did I let things get this bad? How did I become so dependent on a man who treats me like a possession? I think of my own mother, who raised me on her own after my father left. She was so strong, so independent. What would she think of me now, trapped in a marriage with a man who doesn't respect me? I kiss Arya's forehead, feeling a fierce surge of love and protectiveness. I can't let her grow up thinking this is normal. I can't let Dominic's poison infect her too. I may be trapped for now, but I won't let him break me. I'll find a way out, no matter what it takes. For Arya's sake and for my own. I'm at my wit's end when I finally meet best friend Scarlett. We've been friends since college, and she's always been there for me, no matter what. I don't know what to do, I confess, my voice breaking. Dominic is controlling every aspect of my life. I feel like I'm suffocating. Scarlett listens patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. Evelyn, this isn't right, she says gently. He shouldn't be treating you like this. I nod, wiping away tears. I know, but I'm scared, Scarlett. He's threatened to take Arya away from me if I try to leave. Scarlett's eyes widen. He can't do that, she insists. You're Arya's mother. You have rights. She helps me gather evidence of Dominic's deceit and verbal abuse. We take screenshots of the bank statements, documenting the missing funds. I start keeping a journal, writing down every hurtful thing he says to me. Armed with this information, I confront Dominic. We need to talk, I say, my voice shaking but determined. He barely looks up from his phone. Can't it wait? I'm busy. No, it can't wait, I insist. Dominic, I know about the money. I know you've been hiding things from me. At this, he finally meets my gaze, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I hold up the bank statements. You've been spending our savings without telling me. Our daughter's college fund, gone. Dominic scoffs. Is that what this is about? It's just money, Evelyn. I'll make more. It's not just about the money, I say, my voice rising. It's about the lying, the secrets. It's about the way you treat me. He stands up, towering over me. The way I treat you? I give you everything, Evelyn. A beautiful home, a comfortable life. And this is how you repay me? By snooping through my things and making accusations? I take a step back, my heart pounding. I'm not making accusations. I'm telling the truth, and I'm done letting you control me. Dominic's face contorts with rage. You ungrateful bitch, he snarls. If you think you can leave me, think again. I'll make sure you never see Arya again. His words hit me like a slap in the face. You can't do that, I whisper, echoing Scarlett's words. Watch me, he says, his voice cold. I have money, connections. I'll bury you in court. You'll be lucky to get visitation, let alone custody. I feel like I can't breathe. The thought of losing Arya is too much to bear. But then I think of the evidence Scarlett and I have gathered. The bank statements, the journal entries, the recordings of Dominic's threats. I straighten my spine, looking him dead in the eye. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dominic. I have proof of everything you've done, the lies, the abuse. If you try to take Arya away from me, I'll fight you with everything I have. For a moment, Dominic looks stunned. Then his face twists into an ugly sneer. You think you're so clever, don't you? But you're forgetting one thing. I own you, Evelyn. I own everything. And I'll destroy you before I let you leave me. With that, he storms out of the room. Slamming the door behind him, I sink to the floor, my legs shaking. I know this is just the beginning. Dominic won't let me go without a fight, but for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope. I'm not alone anymore. I have Scarlett, and I have the truth on my side. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my daughter and myself, even if it means going to war with the man I once loved. With Scarlett's help, I begin secretly planning my escape from Dominic's clutches. We meet in quiet coffee shops and secluded parks, always looking over our shoulders for any sign of my husband. You need to start saving money, Scarlett advises. Open a separate bank account, one that Dominic doesn't know about. I nod, jotting down notes in a small, nondescript notebook. I'll start skimming a little bit from the grocery budget each week. He won't notice if I'm careful. Scarlett also helps me document Dominic's abuse. We take photos of the bruises on my arms, the holes he's punched in the walls during his rages. I save every threatening text message, every cruel email. It's during one of these evidence-gathering sessions that I stumble upon a shocking discovery. I'm going through Dominic's email, looking for anything incriminating, when I find a string of messages between him and his secretary, Tessa. At first, I think they're just work-related. But as I read on, my stomach twists with a sickening realization. They're not just colleagues, they're having an affair. I miss you, Tessa writes in one email. Last night was amazing. When can we do it again? Dominic's response is filled with explicit details of their trysts, of the things he wants to do to her. I feel like I'm going to be sick. But even as the betrayal cuts me to the core, I feel a flicker of something else. Hope. If Dominic is cheating on me, that means I have even more leverage against him. I print out the emails with shaking hands, adding them to my growing pile of evidence. Armed with this new information, I finally work up the courage to file for divorce. Scarlett comes with me to the courthouse, holding my hand as I fill out the paperwork. When we return home, Dominic is waiting for us. "Where have you been?" he demands, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "I was filing for divorce," I say, my voice steady. "I'm leaving you, Dominic." For a moment he looks stunned. Then his face contorts with rage. "You can't leave me," he snarls. "I won't let you." He takes a step towards me, his fists clenched, but before he can lay a hand on me, Scarlett steps between us. "Don't you dare touch her," she says, her voice like steel. "We have evidence of everything you've done, the abuse, the cheating. If you come near Evelyn or Arya again, we'll go straight to the police." Dominic's eyes widen as he takes in the folder in Scarlett's hand. "You're bluffing," he says, but I can hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Try me," Scarlett replies, her gaze unwavering. For a long moment, they stare each other down. Then Dominic takes a step back, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "Fine," he spits. "You want a divorce? You've got it, but don't think for a second that this is over. I'll make your life a living hell, Evelyn. You'll be begging me to take you back." With that, he storms out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I collapse onto the couch, my legs shaking. Scarlett sits beside me, pulling me into a tight hug. "You did it," she whispers. "You're free." But even as relief washes over me, I know that this is just the beginning. Dominic won't let me go without a fight. He'll do everything in his power to make me suffer. But for the first time in years, I feel a glimmer of hope. I've taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, my freedom, and I won't let Dominic break me. Not again. Not ever. The divorce proceedings begin, and I steel myself for the battle ahead. Dominic has hired a high-powered attorney, a shark in an expensive suit, but I have Scarlett by my side and a fierce determination to protect my daughter. Our first meeting is tense, with Dominic glaring at me from across the conference room table. His lawyer, a man with slicked-back hair and a predatory smile, leans forward. "Mrs. Hawthorne," he begins, his voice dripping with condescension. "My client is willing to offer you a generous settlement in exchange for your cooperation in keeping this matter private." I feel a flush of anger rising in my cheeks. "Generous?" I repeat, my voice tight. "You mean hush money, to keep me quiet about the abuse, the cheating." Dominic's lawyer smirks. "Let's not throw around accusations, Mrs. Hawthorne. My client denies any wrongdoing." I lean forward, meeting his gaze head-on. "I have proof," I say, my voice steady. "Emails, text messages, photographs. I'm not afraid to use them." For a moment, the lawyer's smug expression falters. Then he recovers, clearing his throat. "Be that as it may, I think we can all agree that a protracted legal battle is in no one's best interests, especially not your daughter's." At the mention of Arya, I feel a stab of fear. Dominic knows she's my weakness, my Achilles heel. "What do you want?" I ask, my voice tight. Dominic leans forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "Joint custody," he says. "And a gag order. You keep your mouth shut about our marriage, and I'll let you see Arya on weekends." I feel like I've been punched in the gut. The thought of being separated from my daughter, of only seeing her a few days a month, is unbearable. But then I think of the alternative, of Arya growing up in a home filled with anger and violence, of learning that love means pain and fear. I take a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. "No," I say, my voice ringing with conviction. "I won't agree to that. I want full custody, and I want you out of our lives for good." Dominic's face twists with rage. "You can't do that," he snarls. "I'm her father. I have rights." "You lost those rights the first time you raised a hand to me," I say, my voice shaking with anger. "The first time you chose your own selfish desires over your family." I slide a folder across the table, watching as Dominic's lawyer flips through the pages with a growing look of unease. "This is just the beginning," I say, my voice steady. "If you try to fight me on this, I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of man you really are." For a long moment, Dominic stares at me, his eyes burning with hatred. Then he turns to his lawyer, muttering something under his breath. The lawyer clears his throat, his expression strained. "Perhaps we should take a break," he suggests. "Reconvene at a later date, when emotions aren't running quite so high." I nod, feeling a rush of triumph. I know this is just the first battle in what will likely be a long and brutal war. But for now, I've won. As I leave the conference room, Scarlett falls into step beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You were amazing in there," she says, her voice filled with pride. "I've never seen you so strong, so fearless." I manage a small smile even as my heart races with adrenaline. "I had to be," I say, "for Arya, for myself." We step out into the bright sunlight, and I take a deep breath of fresh air. It feels like the first time I've been able to breathe freely in years. I know the road ahead will be hard. Dominic won't give up without a fight, and I'll have to be strong, and stronger than I've ever been. But for the first time in a long time, I feel a flicker of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I can build a better life for my daughter and myself. A life free from fear, from pain, a life filled with love and laughter and joy. And I'll fight like hell to make that life a reality. The divorce is finalized, and I'm granted full custody of Arya. Dominic is ordered to pay child support and alimony, a fact that leaves him seething with rage. But even as I celebrate my victory, I know that he won't let this go easily. Dominic is a man who hates to lose, who will stop at nothing to get what he wants. I'm proven right just a few days later, when I'm awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of shattering glass. I bolt out of bed, my heart pounding, and race to Arya's room. She's sleeping peacefully, her little face relaxed in slumber. But as I turn to leave, I catch a glimpse of movement outside her window. It's Dominic, his face twisted with fury. He's holding a baseball bat, the shattered remains of the window at his feet. "You think you've won?" he snarls, his voice slurring with drink. "You think you can just take my daughter away from me?" I feel a rush of fear, followed quickly by anger. "Get out of here, Dominic," I say, my voice shaking. "You're violating the restraining order. I'll call the police." He laughs, a harsh, ugly sound. "Go ahead," he taunts. "Call them. By the time they get here, I'll be long gone, and you'll be left picking up the pieces, just like always." I take a step forward, my fists clenched at my sides. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dominic. I'm done letting you control me, letting you hurt me." His eyes narrow, and he takes a step closer, the bat raised threateningly. "You should be afraid," he growls. "I'll make your life a living hell, Evelyn. I'll take Arya away from you, one way or another." But even as he speaks, I feel a sense of calm washing over me. I've spent so long living in fear of this man, letting him dictate my every move, but not anymore. I reach into my pocket, my fingers closing around my phone. "I have proof, Dominic," I say, my voice steady. "Proof of your abuse, your cheating, your illegal business dealings. If you come near me or Arya again, I'll expose everything." For a moment, he looks stunned. Then his face contorts with rage, and he takes another step forward, the bat raised high. But before he can swing, the sound of sirens fills the air. Red and blue lights flash through the broken window, casting an eerie glow over the room. Dominic freezes, his eyes wide with panic. He looks from me to the window, his grip on the bat slackening. "This isn't over," he snarls, backing away. "I'll find a way to make you pay, Evelyn. I swear it." With that, he turns and runs, disappearing into the night just as the police cars screech to a halt outside. I sink to the floor, my legs shaking with relief. Arya stirs in her crib, her little face scrunching up in confusion. "It's okay, baby," I whisper, gathering her into my arms. "Mommy's here. You're safe now." The police take my statement, and I show them the evidence I've gathered against Dominic. They assure me that they'll do everything in their power to keep us safe, to make sure he never comes near us again. But even as I nod and thank them, I know that this is just the beginning. Dominic is a man who doesn't know how to lose, who will stop at nothing to get his revenge. I'll have to be vigilant, always looking over my shoulder, always ready for the next attack. But I'm not alone anymore. I have Scarlett and the support of the law on my side, And most importantly, I have Arya, my beautiful, innocent daughter, who deserves a life free from fear and pain. I'll do whatever it takes to give her that life, to build a future for us that's filled with love and laughter and joy, even if it means facing down the devil himself. 5 years have passed since that fateful night when Dominic shattered our window and threatened to take Arya away from me. In that time, I've worked hard to rebuild my life, to create a safe and happy home for my daughter. I've thrown myself into my career, working my way up the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm. My colleagues admire my tenacity, my ability to think outside the box, and come up with creative solutions to even the toughest challenges. But my greatest achievement is Arya. She's grown into a bright, curious 5-year-old with her father's dark hair and my green eyes. She's the light of my life, the reason I get up every morning and face the world with a smile. We have a little routine, Arya and I. Every morning I make her breakfast and pack her lunch, then walk her to the bus stop for kindergarten. In the evenings we curl up on the couch and read stories together, or have dance parties in the living room. It's a simple life, but it's ours, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. One day, as I'm walking Arya to the bus stop, I bump into a familiar face. It's Liam, a single father who lives down the street. I've seen him around the neighborhood, always with his little boy, Max, in tow. "Evelyn, right?" he says, smiling warmly. "I don't think we've officially met. I'm Liam." I shake his hand, feeling a flutter of something in my chest. "Nice to meet you, Liam. This is my daughter, Arya." Arya waves shyly, hiding behind my leg. Liam crouches down to her level, his eyes twinkling. "Hi there, Arya. I like your backpack. Is that a unicorn?" Arya nods, a tiny smile spreading across her face. "Yeah, unicorns are my favorite." Liam grins, standing back up. "Well, maybe we can all get together for a playdate sometime. Max loves unicorns, too." I find myself nodding, a warm feeling spreading through my chest. "That would be great. Here, let me give you my number." As we exchange numbers, I can't help but feel a spark of something. A connection, a sense of possibility. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I start spending more time together. We take the kids to the park, have picnics in the backyard. He's kind and funny and thoughtful, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. And he's an amazing father. I watch him with Max, the way he listens patiently to his son's endless chatter, the way he gets down on the floor to play with him. It's clear that he loves his boy with every fiber of his being. Slowly but surely, I feel myself falling for him, and for the first time in a long time, I allow myself to imagine a future that's not just about survival, but about happiness. But even as I bask in the glow of new love, I can't shake the feeling that Dominic is still out there, waiting for his chance to strike. And I'm right. One evening, as Liam and I are enjoying a quiet dinner while the kids play in the living room, there's a knock at the door. I open it to find Dominic standing there, his face haggard and his eyes wild. "Evelyn," he says, his voice raspy, "I need to talk to you." I feel a rush of fear, followed quickly by anger. "What are you doing here, Dominic? You know you're not supposed to come near me or Arya." He holds up his hands, his expression pleading. I know. But I had to see you. I've lost everything, Evelyn, my job, my money, even Tessa left me. I have nothing left." For a moment, I feel a flicker of pity, but then I remember all the pain he's caused, all the fear and heartache. "I'm sorry, Dominic," I say, my voice firm, "but that's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." His face twists with rage, and he takes a step forward. "You did this to me, you bitch. You ruined my life." But before he can say another word, Liam is there, stepping between us. "I think you should leave," he says, his voice calm but firm, "before I call the police." Dominic looks from Liam to me, his expression a mix of anger and desperation, but finally he turns and walks away, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As I watch him go, I feel a sense of closure wash over me. I know that he'll always be a part of my past, a shadow that I can never fully escape, but I also know that I'm stronger than he is. I've survived his abuse, his manipulation. I've built a life for myself and my daughter, a life filled with love and joy and possibility. And as I turn back to Liam, to the man who has shown me what true love and partnership can be, I know that I'm finally free to live, to love, to be happy, and that's the greatest revenge of all. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. I barely noticed the splash of bubbly on my new dress as I stared at Brad, my husband of 1 month, in disbelief. "What did you just say?" I managed to choke out, praying I'd misheard him. Brad's blue eyes, once so captivating, now seemed cold and distant. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair and repeated the words that had just shattered my world. "I'm in love with someone else. Aubrey, I want a divorce." The elegant anniversary dinner I'd spent hours preparing lay forgotten on the table behind us. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls of our penthouse apartment. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a cruel joke. "Who is she?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Brad hesitated, then squared his shoulders. "Isabel Hartley." The name hit me like a physical blow. Isabel Hartley, the socialite whose face graced every society page and charity gala in the city. I'd always known Brad had a wandering eye, but this... "How long?" I whispered. 6 months, Brad admitted. "I'm sorry, Aubrey, I never meant for this to happen." A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat. "Never meant for it to happen? We've been married for 4 weeks, Brad. Did you even mean those vows?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I thought I could make it work with us. I really did try." "Try?" I spat. "By sleeping with another woman behind my back?" Brad's expression hardened. "Look, I know this is a shock, but let's be adults about this. We can handle the divorce quietly. No need for a big scene." I gaped at him, fury rising to replace the initial shock. "A big scene? You drop this bomb on our anniversary and expect me to just roll over?" "Come on, Aubrey," Brad said, his tone patronizing. "You had to know deep down that this wasn't working. We've been drifting apart for years." "Because you've been cheating on me," I shouted, finally losing my composure. "God, how many times have I forgiven you? And now this." Brad's phone chimed. He glanced at it, then back at me. "I have to go. We can discuss the details later when you've calmed down." As he moved towards the door, something inside me snapped. I grabbed the nearest object, a crystal vase, another wedding gift, and hurled it at the wall. It exploded in a shower of glass, making Brad jump. "You want a divorce?" I snarled. "Fine. But don't think for a second I'm going to make this easy for you. I've stood by you for 10 years, Brad. I've forgiven every indiscretion, supported your career, been the perfect wife. No more." Brad's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "What are you saying?" I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze with steel in my own. "I'm saying that if you want out of this marriage, it's going to cost you. Big time. Now, Aubrey, let's not be hasty." "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." Brad hesitated for a moment, then nodded curtly. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, heedless of the broken glass. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back furiously. No more crying over Brad Thompson. No more being the understanding, forgiving wife. As I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, a new resolve began to form. Brad wanted a divorce? Fine. But he was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I reached for my phone with shaking hands. It was time to call a lawyer. I stared at the divorce papers spread across my kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of wine within easy reach. It had been 3 days since Brad's bombshell, and the shock was finally wearing off, replaced by a simmering anger that threatened to boil over at any moment. My phone buzzed. Another message from my best friend Lydia. "How are you holding up, sweetie? Need me to come over?" I sighed, typing out a quick reply. "I'm fine. Just going over everything with the lawyer tomorrow. Talk soon." The truth was, I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want their pity or their well-meaning advice. What I wanted was justice. As I poured another glass of wine, memories of the past decade flooded back. The first time I caught Brad cheating, just 2 years into our relationship. His tearful apologies, promises to change, and like a fool, I believed him. Then there was the work trip to Vegas that turned out to be a weekend with his secretary. The flirtatious texts I found on his phone from countless women. Each time I forgave him. Each time I thought things would be different. "Never again," I muttered, taking a long swig of wine. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my bitter reverie. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I considered ignoring it, but something compelled me to answer. I wish I hadn't. Brad stood in the hallway, looking annoyingly handsome in an expensive suit. "Aubrey," he said, his voice soft. "Can we talk?" Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door in his face. Instead, I stepped aside, letting him in. "Nice suit," I said coldly. "Isabel's taste, I assume?" Brad winced. "Look, I know you're angry." "Angry doesn't begin to cover it," I snapped. "What do you want, Brad?" He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I once found endearing. Now it just irritated me. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the alimony." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I'm willing to be generous," he said, pulling out a folded document. "I had my lawyer draw this up. It's a fair settlement, Aubrey. More than fair, actually." I snatched the paper from his hand, scanning the numbers. My eyes widened. It was indeed generous, far more than I'd expected. "Why?" I demanded, suspicion creeping in. "What's the catch?" Brad sighed. "No catch. I want to make this right, or as right as it can be, given the circumstances." For a moment, I almost believed him, almost fell for the sincere look in his eyes, the regretful tone in his voice. But then I remembered all the times I'd heard this before. "Make it right?" I laughed bitterly. "You can't make this right, Brad. You've humiliated me, betrayed me, and for what? Some socialite who'll probably toss you aside the moment someone richer comes along?" Brad's expression hardened. "That's not fair. Isabel and I—" "I don't want to hear it." I cut him off. "You know what? Keep your generous offer. I'll see you in court." I crumpled up the settlement offer and threw it at his chest. Brad's eyes widened in surprise. "Aubrey, don't be foolish," he warned. "This is more than you'd get in any court settlement. Think about your future." His condescending tone was the final straw. "My future?" I hissed. "My future was supposed to be with you, Brad. But you threw that away, so now I'm going to build a new future. One where I don't have to depend on your generosity or anyone else's." I yanked open the door. "Get out, and tell your lawyer to prepare for war." As the door slammed behind him, I leaned against it, heart pounding. Part of me screamed that I was making a mistake, that I should take the money and run. But a stronger part, a part I'd buried for far too long, whispered something else. It whispered of justice, of standing up for myself at last, of making Brad pay for every lie, every betrayal. I walked back to the kitchen, bypassing the wine glass for the bottle itself. Tomorrow, I'd call my lawyer. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. And this time, I wasn't backing down. I stood in the courthouse hallway, my heart pounding as I waited for my lawyer to emerge from the judge's chambers. The divorce proceedings had been a whirlwind, moving faster than I'd ever imagined possible. Brad's eagerness to settle had initially made me suspicious, but now I was beginning to understand why. The door opened and my lawyer Sarah strode out with a satisfied smile. "It's done, Aubrey. The judge approved the settlement." I blinked, stunned. "Just like that? What about the fight I was preparing for?" Sarah shrugged. "Sometimes we get lucky. Brad's lawyer pushed for a quick resolution, and the terms are more than fair. You're getting a very generous alimony package." As if summoned by his name, Brad appeared at the end of the hallway, Isabel clinging to his arm like an expensive accessory. My stomach churned at the sight of them together. "Congratulations, Aubrey," Brad said, his tone maddeningly cordial. "I hope this settlement helps you start fresh." I wanted to slap the smug look off his face. Instead, I forced a smile. "Oh, it will. Thank you for your generosity." Isabel's eyes narrowed. "Brad, darling, we'll be late for the charity gala. We should go." As they turned to leave, I couldn't resist one parting shot. "Enjoy the high life, Brad. I hope it's worth it." He paused, looking back at me with an unreadable expression. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But then Isabel tugged on his arm, and they were gone. I let out a shaky breath. "It's really over, isn't it?" Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "It is. And you came out on top, Aubrey. The alimony alone will set you up comfortably for years." But as we left the courthouse, a nagging doubt gnawed at me. Why had Brad given in so easily? What was he hiding? Weeks passed, and I tried to settle into my new life as a single woman. The alimony checks arrived like clockwork, each one a reminder of the life I'd left behind. I should have felt victorious, relieved. Instead, I felt empty. One rainy afternoon, as I scrolled mindlessly through social media, a headline caught my eye. "Tech mogul Brad Thompson and socialite wife make splash at Hamptons Gala." The photo showed Brad and Isabel dressed to the nines, champagne flutes in hand. They looked sickeningly happy, surrounded by the glitterati of New York's elite. Anger bubbled up inside me. While I sat alone in my apartment, Brad was living it up with his new wife, spending the money he'd built his company with during our marriage. I was about to close the app when another headline made me freeze. Thompson Tech stock soars after surprise merger announcement. My hands shaking, I clicked the link. Brad's company, the one he'd started with seed money from my family, had just merged with a major Silicon Valley firm. The deal was worth billions. Suddenly, Brad's eagerness to settle, his generous alimony, it all made sense. He'd known this merger was coming. He'd rushed the divorce through before the news broke, before the true value of his assets could be calculated. I'd been played. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. I felt sick, betrayed all over again. Not just by Brad, but by the system that was supposed to protect me, to ensure a fair division of our marital assets. As I sat there surrounded by the trappings of my old life, a cold determination settled over me. Brad thought he'd won, that he'd outsmarted me one last time. But he'd underestimated me, again. I picked up my phone, my fingers flying over the keys as I composed an email to Sarah. It was time to reopen the case. Time to show Brad and the world that Aubrey Thompson wasn't going down without a fight. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice. And I was going to get mine, no matter what it took. I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen, willing the words to come. The website for my fledgling interior design business sat half-finished, a digital representation of my stalled life. It had been 3 months since the divorce, and I was struggling to find my footing. The alimony checks from Brad sat untouched in my bank account. Using that money felt like admitting defeat, like letting him win all over again. But my savings were dwindling, and the rent on this apartment, our old apartment, was due soon. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Lydia, arms laden with takeout bags. "Intervention time," she announced, breezing past me into the kitchen. "You've been ghosting everyone for weeks. Enough is enough." I sighed, following her. "I'm fine, Lydia, just busy with the new business." She fixed me with a skeptical look. "Uh-huh. And how's that going?" I gestured helplessly at my laptop. "It's a work in progress." Lydia's expression softened. "Sweetie, you can't keep punishing yourself. What happened with Brad wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it?" I countered, the bitterness I'd been suppressing bubbling to the surface. I was the one who kept forgiving him, who believed his lies. And now look at me, hiding in this apartment while he's out there living his best life with Isabel. Lydia grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to meet her gaze. "Listen to me, Aubrey. You are not the villain in this story. You're the hero. It's time you started acting like it." Her words hit me like a splash of cold water. She was right. I'd been wallowing in self-pity, letting Brad's betrayal define me. It was time to take control of my narrative. With newfound determination, I turned back to my laptop. "Help me finish this website," I said to Lydia. "It's time to launch this business for real." We worked through the night, fueled by takeout and determination. By dawn, Aubrey's Interiors was live, my portfolio of past projects proudly displayed for the world to see. As the sun rose, my phone pinged with a notification, my first client inquiry, then another and another. Lydia squealed, hugging me tight. "See? You've got this." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could do this after all. But life, as I was learning, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. A week later, as I was preparing for my first official client meeting, my phone rang. It was Sarah, my lawyer. "Aubrey, we have a problem," she said, her voice tense. "Brad's lawyers are contesting the divorce settlement. They're claiming you knew about the merger before signing and are accusing you of fraud." The room spun around me. "What? That's ridiculous. I had no idea." "I know," Sarah cut in. "But they're pushing hard. If they win, you could lose everything. The alimony, the apartment, all of it." I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. Just when I thought I was moving forward, Brad found a way to drag me back into his web of lies. "What do we do?" I whispered. Sarah's voice was grim. "We fight. But Aubrey, I need to know. Is there anything at all that could support their claims? Any conversations with Brad about the company before the divorce?" I racked my brain, thinking back to those tumultuous weeks. Then, with a jolt, I remembered, the night Brad came over with the settlement offer. He'd mentioned something about his company, about the future. I'd been too angry to pay attention at the time, but now... There might be, I admitted, my stomach churning. But Sarah, I swear I didn't know about the merger. I believe you, she said, but a good lawyer could twist this. We need to be prepared for a tough battle. As I hung up the phone, I stared at my newly launched website. The dream I'd just begun to build was already under threat. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Brad destroy me again. If he wanted a fight, he'd get one. But this time, I'd be ready. I picked up my phone, dialing Lydia's number. I need your help, I said when she answered. It's time to dig up every bit of dirt we can find on Brad Thompson. No more playing nice. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. I never thought I'd find myself skulking outside a high-end restaurant, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Through the window, I could see Brad and Isabel laughing with a group of well-heeled socialites. The sight made my blood boil. Are you sure about this? Lydia whispered beside me. I nodded grimly. We need dirt on Brad, and his new crowd is our best bet. We'd spent weeks digging into Brad's life, looking for anything to counter his fraud accusations. So far, we'd come up empty. But tonight, Brad was dining with Isabel's father, a notoriously shady businessman. If there was dirt to be found, it would be here. As the group exited the restaurant, Lydia and I ducked behind a parked car. Brad's voice carried in the night air. Don't worry, Richard, he was saying to Isabel's father. The SEC won't find anything. I've made sure of it. My heart raced. SEC? What had Brad gotten himself into? We trailed them to a nearby bar, slipping inside and finding a secluded booth. Brad and his group were at the bar, drinks flowing freely. As the night wore on, their voices grew louder, less guarded. Another round, Brad called, his words slightly slurred, to outsmarting the government and my ex-wife. Laughter erupted from the group. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to march over and confront him. Easy, Lydia murmured, placing a hand on my arm. We're here for information, remember? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. That's when I heard it. Brad, bragging about cooking the books for his recent merger. It was easy, he boasted. Those idiots at the SEC don't have a clue. And Aubrey? She signed away her rights without even realizing what she was giving up. The words hit me like a physical blow. Brad hadn't just cheated on me, he'd committed fraud and used our divorce to cover his tracks. Suddenly, Isabel's shrill voice cut through the din. Brad, darling, isn't that your ex-wife? I froze, realizing too late that in my shock I'd stood up from our booth. Brad's eyes met mine across the room, widening in recognition and then narrowing in anger. Time to go, Lydia hissed, grabbing my arm. We bolted for the exit, but Brad was faster. He caught up to us on the sidewalk, his face flushed with alcohol and rage. What the hell are you doing here, Aubrey? He demanded. I straightened my spine, meeting his gaze. Just having a drink, Brad. Is that a crime? Don't play dumb, he snarled. You were spying on me. What did you hear? Enough, I shot back. Enough to know that you're not just a cheater, but a criminal, too. Brad's face paled. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. Listen carefully, he hissed. You breathe a word of what you heard tonight to anyone, and I'll make sure you lose everything. The alimony, your precious little business, all of it. Do you understand me? I should have been terrified. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. In that moment, I saw Brad for what he truly was. A bully, a coward, and a fraud. No, Brad, I said quietly. You listen. I'm not the same woman you married. I'm not afraid of you anymore. So go ahead, try to take everything from me. But remember this. I know your secrets now, and I'm not afraid to use them. I turned on my heel, leaving Brad sputtering on the sidewalk. As Lydia and I hurried away, my mind raced. I had the information I needed now, but using it came with enormous risk. If I exposed Brad's fraud, I could lose everything in the ensuing legal battle. But if I stayed silent, could I live with myself? As we reached my apartment, I made my decision. I turned to Lydia, my voice steady. Call Sarah, I said. It's time to fight fire with fire. The battle lines were drawn, and this time I was ready for war. I stared at the television in disbelief, my coffee slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor. Brad's face filled the screen, his usual confident smirk replaced by a look of panic. Breaking news, the anchor announced. Tech mogul Brad Thompson's company, Thompson Tech, is under investigation by the SEC for alleged fraud and insider trading. My phone erupted with notifications. Texts from Lydia, calls from Sarah, even messages from old mutual friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Everyone wanted to know, had I known? Was I involved? I ignored them all, my eyes glued to the screen as more details emerged. The merger that had made Brad millions was now unraveling, dragging down not just his company but several others connected to Isabel's family. A knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Sarah, looking grim. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the apartment. "The SEC wants to question you about Brad's activities during your marriage." My stomach dropped. But I didn't know anything. Sarah's expression was sympathetic but firm. "They don't know that, and given the timing of your divorce and the merger..." "They think I was in on it," I finished, feeling sick. As Sarah outlined our legal options, my mind raced. I thought of the night at the bar, of Brad's drunken boasts. I had evidence that could bury him, but using it meant admitting I'd been spying on him. It could make me look complicit. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Aubrey?" Isabel's voice, usually so haughty, now sounded desperate. "Please, you have to help us. He's not handling this well." I laughed bitterly. "And why should I care?" "Because," Isabel's voice broke, "he's threatening to implicate you. He says if he goes down, he's taking you with him." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I ended the call, turning to Sarah with wide eyes. "We have a problem." Hours later, I sat in a sleek conference room, facing a team of stern-faced SEC investigators. Sarah sat beside me, a reassuring presence as I recounted my marriage to Brad, the divorce, everything I knew about his business dealings. "Mrs. Thompson," one investigator leaned forward, "are you aware that your ex-husband claims you had full knowledge of the merger and its irregularities?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I am now, but it's not true. Brad kept me in the dark about his business dealings throughout our marriage." "Can you prove that?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I can, but I need assurances that I won't be implicated for how I obtained this information." The investigators exchanged glances. "Go on," I recounted the night at the bar, playing the audio recording I'd secretly made on my phone. Brad's drunken confessions filled the room, damning him with every word. As the recording ended, a heavy silence fell. The lead investigator nodded slowly. "This changes things. Mrs. Thompson, we'll need you to come in for a formal statement." I left the SEC offices feeling drained but oddly liberated. I'd taken a risk, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was taking control of my own story. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this." I should have been scared. Instead, I felt a surge of determination. Brad had underestimated me for the last time. As I hailed a cab, my phone rang again. This time, it was my biggest client, calling to cancel our contract in light of this scandal. In the span of a day, I'd become toxic by association. I leaned back in the cab, closing my eyes. I'd done the right thing, but at what cost? My business, my reputation, my future, everything I'd worked so hard to rebuild was now hanging by a thread. But as the city lights blurred past the window, I made a silent vow. I'd survived Brad's betrayal once. I would survive this too. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head on. Little did I know, the real battle was just beginning. The pounding on my door jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock, 3:17 a.m. My heart raced as I approached the door, peering through the peephole. What I saw made my blood run cold. Brad stood there, disheveled and wild-eyed, a far cry from the polished executive I'd once known. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. "Aubrey, please," his voice cracked. "I know you're in there. I need your help." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Brad stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and desperation. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, keeping my distance. Brad's eyes darted around the room. "It's all falling apart, Aubrey. The company, the merger, everything. Isabel left me. Her family's lawyers are circling like vultures." "And this concerns me how?" I crossed my arms, fighting to keep my voice steady. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. "I'm sorry for everything. I was a fool, Aubrey. I threw away the best thing in my life for what? A life that was all smoke and mirrors." I'd imagined this moment so many times, Brad broken, apologizing, but now that it was happening, I felt nothing but a cold, hard anger. "You're only sorry because you got caught," I said flatly. "If your schemes had worked out, you'd still be living it up with Isabel, wouldn't you?" Brad's face crumpled. "No, that's not true." I've realized. Save it, I cut him off. What do you want, Brad? Why are you really here? He took a deep breath. I need your help. The SEC, they're building a case against me. But if you testify that you knew about the merger, that you were involved... I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to perjure myself, to go down with you? Please, Aubrey, he begged, reaching for my hand. I jerked away. We were a team once. We could be again. I still love you. For a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved, the man I'd forgiven time and time again. But then I remembered the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, the humiliation of discovering his affairs, the way he'd discarded me for a younger model. No, I said, my voice steel. We're not a team, Brad. We haven't been for a long time. And you don't love me. You love what I represent. A way out of the mess you've made. Brad's face hardened. You owe me, Aubrey, that alimony you've been living on. My money built your precious little business. I laughed bitterly. Your money? You mean the money you defrauded from investors? The money you used to buy your way into Isabel's world? Be careful, Brad growled, taking a step towards me. You don't want to make an enemy of me. Fear flashed through me, but I stood my ground. No, Brad, you don't want to make an enemy of me. I have the recording, remember? One call to the SEC and... Brad lunged at me, his eyes wild. I stumbled backwards, knocking over a lamp. The crash seemed to snap him out of it. He stared at his hands in horror. Oh God, Aubrey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. Get out now, or I'm calling the police. Brad's shoulders slumped in defeat. As he shuffled towards the door, he turned back one last time. I really am sorry, Aubrey, for everything. The door closed behind him, and I sank to the floor, trembling. I'd stood my ground, but at what cost? Brad was desperate, unpredictable. What if he made good on his threats? My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. SEC wants to meet tomorrow. Urgent. I closed my eyes, exhaustion washing over me. In a few hours, I'd have to face the investigators again. I'd have to decide once and for all, protect myself or tell the whole truth and risk everything. As dawn broke over the city, I made my choice. Whatever came next, I was done living in Brad's shadow. It was time to write my own story, no matter the consequences. I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Months had passed since that night Brad showed up at my door, desperate and unhinged. In that time, my world had been turned upside down. The SEC investigation had been brutal. Every aspect of my life with Brad had been scrutinized, every financial decision questioned. I'd lost clients, friends, and more than a few nights' sleep. But I'd stood my ground, telling the truth even when it hurt. Now, as I waited for the judge's decision, I caught Brad's eye across the courtroom. He looked haggard, a shell of the man who'd once commanded boardrooms. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered all the pain he'd caused, and my resolve hardened. In the matter of the United States versus Bradley Thompson, the judge began, her voice cutting through the tense silence. This court finds the defendant guilty on all counts of fraud and insider trading. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I closed my eyes, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. It was over. Finally, truly over. As the judge detailed Brad's sentence, years in prison, millions in fines, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I'd told the truth, consequences be damned, and justice had prevailed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. I pushed through them, ignoring the cameras and microphones thrust in my face. Lydia was waiting by the curb, a supportive smile on her face. You did it, Aubrey, she said, pulling me into a hug. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not really. As we drove away from the courthouse, I knew the hardest part was just beginning. I had to rebuild. My life, my business, my trust in myself. Months passed. Slowly, painstakingly, I pieced my world back together. My interior design business, nearly destroyed by the scandal, began to recover. Clients who'd abandoned me started to return, drawn by my newfound reputation for integrity. One day, as I was finishing up a consultation with a new client, I noticed a man lingering by my office door. He was handsome, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Can I help you? I asked, curious. He stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm David. I hope this isn't too forward, but I've been following your story in the news. What you did, standing up to your ex-husband like that, it was incredibly brave. I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. Thank you. It wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. David's smile widened. "I was wondering if you might like to grab coffee sometime? To talk about interior design, of course," he added with a wink. For a moment, I hesitated. The wounds from Brad's betrayal were still fresh. But as I looked into David's eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: genuine admiration and respect. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. As David and I walked out of my office chatting easily, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd stood shell-shocked in her kitchen all those months ago, listening to her husband confess his affair. This woman was stronger, wiser, and unafraid to stand up for herself. She'd faced her worst fears and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. I thought of Brad, sitting in his prison cell, stripped of the wealth and status he'd valued above all else. I no longer felt anger or bitterness towards him. Instead, I felt something unexpected: gratitude. His betrayal had forced me to confront my own strength, to rebuild my life on my terms. In trying to destroy me, he'd inadvertently set me free. As David held the door open for me, I stepped out into the sunlight, ready to embrace whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited to face it. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning.